What's up, everyone? Welcome to Normal America Show. I'm your host, robnoerr, having a fantastic day today. Hope you all are having a great day as well. Is my mic down a little? Let me up that. You gotta have the mic set up. Come on. It's great to see y'all. What's up, Hutch? My body double, sweet tat. More to come, I'm assuming. Great to see you all here today. I'm just having a wonderful, fantastic day for reals. Fighting with people on Twitter, that's always fun. But I'm in a jovial mood. I really am. I had a long day, but a great day. So I'll talk a little about that. Tonight, we'll talk about some small Twitter spats. Some small Twitter spats. Oh, there we go. Ellen DeGenere's on here. There he is, Ellen DeGenerer. We're just going to ban Ellen DeGenerer here now for accusing me of being a rapist. So just take care of that. Yeah, peace going to Econoboy on Twitter. Even Ellen DeGenerer somewhat. We'll talk about them as well. I don't mind people disagreeing with me. Anyone who's going to falsely call me a rapist over and over again can get back. I don't care. So, but yeah, having a great day. Arguing with people on Twitter. We'll talk a little about that. Alan's such a lovable loser. Hope his grandpa is doing great that he lives with. He still has not offered to send me the tens of thousands of dollars he was going to send to people I know that need insurance. Strange. Who would have thought? The guy living with his grandparent lied about having tens of thousands of dollars to donate to people's healthcare needs. Oh, well. And for someone who claims they don't really follow Vaush, always sticking up for him on Twitter. So we'll get to poor victim Vaush. We'll get to that later in the show. Such a victim. The system's always out to get Vaush, these evil social media companies. They're always bringing the hammer down on Vaush. He really wants Ethan from H3H3 to know that. It must suck to have the system out to get you. Except every one of these platforms favors people like Vaush. That's the cry bully left for you. Have all the institutions on their side and still have to act like they're the victim and have no power. They want you canceled, but oh boy, if one of them gets a strike, oh, it's not fair. We didn't do anything. So we'll talk a little about that later. What's up, Sparky, my friend? Great show with Sparky last night. You should check out. You can go on my Twitter and find that show. You can go on Sparky's YouTube channel, I believe, and find that show. And you could probably find that show still on my Twitch. Maybe it's on my Rumble. I don't know if it uploaded there. YouTube, I have to delete all my live streams because, But he was wrong. I saw he was doing a live stream, too. Econoboy was doing a live stream kind of defending his position. Listen, I will say this about Econoboy. He was wrong. Because of sort of probably partisan hackery, or he's incompetent in his area of expertise. Yeah, there you go. It's on Twitch, Sparky's Twitch, Rumble, and YouTube channel. So check it out. I thought it was great. I enjoyed myself thoroughly. It was like 2 hours. But you have an appreciation, and I'll talk to Econoboy again in the future. I told him today after we argued on Twitter. I planned on talking to him at the end of the year because that's when sort of his prediction was that inflation would be basically being dealt with by the end of the year, at the end of 2022. So it's been about 10 months, almost a year since our first interaction when we had like a 5-hour discussion on the economy. That's when he said by the end of 2022, he assumed that inflation would be mitigated significantly. So I thought, okay. And then we had another debate in the Crucible about 6 months ago or so. So I figured, well, at the end of that year, we'll bring Econoboy on. And listen, I think I told Econoboy this at the time, and I truly believe this. I would still happily eat crow. Let's say, I don't know what happens, but in the next 2 months, the economy starts booming. Inflation goes way down. I'd cheer for that. I would say, great. Now, I was right that inflation was going to be a terrible problem for a considerable amount of time, while the Biden administration was telling us it's the focus thing keeps screwing up. Come on, camera. Refocus. Focus. Focus. This thing. All right, we'll try this. There we go. But, I'm never rooting, despite what our friend of the show, Omar, said on Twitter about me, I'm never rooting for the country to fail. I wish first off, Joe Biden did some things that I initially was in favor of, such as the pull out of Afghanistan. He just botched the way he did it, but I stick up for him on that. Absolutely did. Yeah, I know, Sparky. The diesel shortage it's going to be crazy. But I've acknowledged all along, I would rather be wrong when I predict something bad's going to happen. I wish I was wrong when I correctly predicted lockdowns would be a disaster. I wish I was wrong. I wish I was wrong when I correctly predicted mandates would be a disaster. I wish I was wrong when I correctly predicted that the quagmire in Afghanistan would be a disaster for years and years. But I was right. He feels great, Luigi. That's what he's saying in his live stream. I caught a little bit of his live stream tonight. He feels like he did great. It's not his fault that his predictions didn't come to fruition. And there's coping, and as you would expect. That's the experts for you. There you go. So we'll look at some of that tonight. I thought, why not? Let's get into a little of that. And it's actually a topic. But I will say this, to Econoboy's credit. It's at least someone, let's be honest. I'll be straight up. I'll be absolutely straight up. I was more of a dick to Econoboy than he was to me. And it's sort of the nature of, I don't think it was over the top or anything like that. But it's just frustrating to hear someone sort of deflect, obfuscate, gloss over things when they were so obviously wrong. But I will admit that. But still, that's at least a productive conversation I had with Econoboy. Even if we have massive disagreements, and I think that I've borne out to be correct on what the positions were that we were advocating for, at least that's better than like Ellen DeGenerer just accusing me of being a rapist and talking about putting drugs up his ass. So I will happily talk to Econoboy again. I think those are actually conversations that I enjoy having as opposed to the quality of conversation I've been having late. But right before we get into it here today, a couple things. I just want to thank my audience. Last night, I asked my audience if they could reach out to Adam Friended on Twitter, who was asking for guests on his show. And I'd reached out to Adam and Sitch several times, was unable to get a response. And during the show last night, Adam actually reached out to me. Primarily, special thanks to Galil, who apparently was the one that he responded to first. So it looks like I'll be doing that show soon. I'm not sure when. But yeah, so thank you to my audience for that. That means more to me than financial donations and stuff like that. So I really appreciate it because I'm just a nobody. I don't have connections to anyone. I'm not a leftist with this built-in leftist audience. So, I'm just a guy from rural Pennsylvania, and I think that I'm pretty good at what I do. What is this? But yeah, it's hard for me. I don't know how to sell myself and reach out to people. So I do appreciate my audience for that. So I really do. The other thing I want to talk about, I'm having a fantastic day today. For those that have watched me before, I have a son named Hank. He will be 2 years old on January 9th. And Hank fell and broke his leg about a month ago, about 29 days ago. And he had a full leg cast on. And we took him to Children's today. And he got the leg cast removed. They did an x-ray. Everything looks great. He goes back for a checkup in 3 weeks, but it looks fantastic. And I couldn't be happier to get the little guy out of the leg cast. Now, his leg's still weak. They said it'll be sore and it's itchy. You tell there's like it looked like when your sunburn's healing, like some dead skin. But they said that's normal. So we've been, it's time in the bathtub, lotion, stuff like that to keep the skin, from getting too dry and too itchy. And he's really a trooper. He's trying to walk on it already. He's standing up with some help. So I couldn't be happier. It was a great day. So I was kind of, as we're sitting there, my mom came to visit and I was chirping at people on Twitter. It was good stuff. Yeah. Sorry to hear that, Pro Law. Yeah. But Hank's doing good, man. He did good with the cast. It's kind of funny, too, the way it works out, because it took him about 2 to 2.5 weeks with the full leg cast until he got pretty adept at walking with it. so he could push himself up like in a, hands and tippy toes, push himself up and then stand straight up and then walk kind of like a Frankenstein, like drag it, because the one leg obviously can't bend. It was a full leg cast. So he was just proficient for that for like a week. And then we get the cast removed and now his leg's sore where he can't walk like on 2 feet. So the poor kid, he's back to, dragging his leg, but the doctor said that's totally normal. And it might be a week or so before he's walking, the way that he used to. So, but I'm very excited. I just couldn't be happier. He's such a trooper. He's a great guy. And it was just funny to watch him put him in the car seat, like bending his knee and looking at it. I mean, look, I'm by no means am I some sort of biologist or neurologist to understand the workings of toddlers' brains, but I try to put myself in that position. And like, you're 1.5, 1 3/4 years old and you break your leg and you get this leg cast. I mean, in his head, he probably thought that was forever, right? Like, this is my leg now. Just, it's stiff. It doesn't bend like it used to. Oh, well, I'll get used to that, and so it's got to be really interesting from his point of view to like, wow, I could bend my leg like my other leg now. It's like, I don't know, but I love the guy. He's the best. Am I getting excited for the Fetterman debate? Closed caption debate. It'll be good, huh? I'll try to cover that one. I really will. Boy, the Republicans have just been cleaning up the Democrats in all these debates they've done. It's crazy. No wonder the Democrats, even Herschel Walker, who everyone was saying, like, isn't it always funny? Like, the Democrats say this. Like, I remember the last time Democrats were doing, like, with Herschel Walker, they're like, oh, Herschel Walker's stupid. Ralph Warnock will destroy him. He didn't. I thought Walker won pretty convincingly. I don't think he won as well as J.D. Vance won or as well as Blake Masters won, but he crushed it. You remember, like, I remember there was this, like, big claim, like, oh, wait until the vice presidency debate, like, Kamala Harris. Like, people were talking her up. I'm like, have you heard her? She's horrible. Where's this faith in Kamala? Beto O'Rourke, he'll crush someone in a debate. What? Now, one person that I think actually would be a reasonable debater, I would think, even though I think he did not as well as I expected, was Pete Buttigieg. Because Buttigieg, regardless of what you think of him, seems like someone who is a persuasive talker, similar to Obama. Not as good as Obama, but... Yeah. Carrie Lake is probably my favorite politician. I just love Carrie Lake. She is a better version of me. She goes on the offense. She's more level-headed about it, though. She's just fantastic. Yeah, Fabian's covering that tonight. Yeah. Yeah, we talked about that last night in Aircraft Sparky's show. The CDC approving this vax. Check out Fabian's show. I'm sure he's doing a good job of it, but one of the most troubling things is the states can decline. They could say, well, this is just a recommendation. It's up to each state which vaxes are mandated for kids. Many will go along with what the CDC says. But the states that won't, the problem's still going to be, well, athletic competitions interscholastically, such as collegiate athletics, might require it. And even more troubling, this probably keeps a lawsuit from ever occurring to these vaccine manufacturers. Because once the CDC officially recommends it, my understanding is that sort of their hands are washed of it. So, but we'll talk about that more as time goes on. All right, let's talk about the economy and sort of where we're going today. So a couple characters that you'll need to know for this story. The first is House Majority Whip Clyburn. So I'm going to show a clip from them. The second person is a person named Econoboy, who I debated twice, once on the Crucible and once just in a call-in that lasted for about 5 hours. Someone who claims to be, and I'm quoting, well-respected in the field of economics, who has several degrees in economics as far as I know. And the third person is Pisco, who you probably know, but Pisco's a lawyer who likes to try to argue legalese with me, but usually just ends up showing that he's a partisan hack. So those are the characters that are going to be involved in this first story. Now, when I debated Econoboy, about 10 months ago was the first debate, and then I think it was 2-3 months after that we debated on the Crucible. The first debate we talked about all sorts of things factoring into the economy: illegal immigration, Medicare for all, socialism, welfare policies, inflation, lockdowns. how well Biden was doing on the economy. And he thought that Biden was doing pretty good on the economy, which I think is laughable. And I was able to accurately predict, which I don't, not because I'm a genius, just because I'm not a hack, I'm not a partisan, that the economy was going to be really tough for a lot of people. That was the direction. And this idea that inflation was transitory and it wasn't going to be a problem and the economy was doing good for low income people, et cetera, that was nonsense. I knew that was going to be, but it was garbage. And I don't have a degree in economics. I don't call myself well respected in the field of economics. And so that was sort of the discussion. And then we had a second debate then on inflation and how much Biden was responsible on the crucible, which I'll get to sort of the specifics of that. The second debate occurred based on a comment that I heard on the first debate. And a lot of times this is what will happen, especially if it's in a field that I think that I don't have a ton of expertise in, which is many fields. Sometimes the best you could do is say what your opinion is, and then your person you're discussing with says their opinion, and you say, okay, we'll see what happens then. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right that Biden's doing a great job in the economy, that this is transitory. It's going to immediately turn around. We're going to see great economic numbers. Maybe you're right. And so, or, when we're talking foreign policy, what do you expect to happen with Biden with foreign policy? Oh, he'll do this. Okay, we'll see. What do you think will happen with the Russia-Ukraine war? Okay, we'll see. I give my opinions on it. I might be wrong. And I always am cheering for what's best for the United States. I really am. If that means that the policies, the economic policies of Biden and the Democrats prove to be awesome, then good. I'm not cheering for I'm not Bill Maher. I'm cheering for a recession to harm the Democrats. No, I'm cheering for the economy to do well so my friends and family don't lose their homes. That's what I'm cheering for. And the other thing is this, Econoboy definitely sounds better than me on the specific application of economics, such as understanding sort of the linguistics and the jargon that goes behind it. But oftentimes what you could see is that the experts run you afoul. It's much like you could talk to an expert on lockdowns that were telling you how locking down children would be good. Then when you looked at the numbers, you realized that wasn't the case. But they could outspeak maybe you. And I don't think Econoboy outspoke me necessarily. I'm not saying that. But they talk like someone in that field. And to a layman, that can sound very impressive. And so we went back and forth on this, and Ellen DeGenere's mad that I banned him from YouTube for claiming I'm a rapist. Boy. Anyways, we'll get to Ellen DeGenerer later. Hi, Ellen. If you're listening, tell your grandpa we said hi. Hope he's doing great, that you live with. So one of the things he said, I asked what his prediction on sort of inflation would be. And admittedly, it was 5.5 hours. I worded clunkily because the question's not just inflation, it's economic outlook in general, But inflation's a measuring stick, and it was one that was being talked about, I believe, in December when we had this discussion. And my characterization of what he said was basically inflation was going to be short term, it would be transitory, and by the end of 2022, we'd basically see it solved. All right, let's take care of this. There we go. Stick to the Molly. Leave me alone, Ellen. So that was basically my interpretation of what he said. He all but clarifies that that's what he said in the opening of the second debate we had. And so then several times in the months that led by, we would see inflation numbers hit another record high, since the 80s, etc. And I would be like, hey, Econoboy, not looking good, right? Thought this was going to be all we're going to start to see it declining, And he'd be like, oh, and I was like, yeah, we'll talk sometime. We'll talk at the end of the year. So I will show you how this started then today. So that's leading up to where we're at. And so we'll start there. Oops, I don't need to do that. So let's do that. So it started with this tweet that I sent. Let me get headphones out. Now this is Dem Whip Clyburn, the House Whip. Basically puts him, I think,
Congressman,
third in
what do you
charge.
say to people?
So let's hear this clip, and this is on some MSNBC show. This is Clyburn that's being asked a question.
Congressman, what do you say to people who say, boy, Washington can talk about all these big programs and everything else, but I'm worried about the cost of food. I'm seeing the cost of eggs shoot up, chicken, gasoline, coming now with the winter, the heating. I mean, these are all concerns that hit very directly to people who may say, what's going on in D.C. doesn't think of us.
Well, let me make it very clear. All of us are concerned about these rising costs, and all of us knew this would be the case when we put in place this recovery program. Anytime you put more money into the economy, prices tend to rise.
Did you hear that? When you put more money into the economy, prices tend to rise. Now, the second debate that I had on the Crucible, we were prepared. It was basically, I can't remember the specific topic, but it had to do with Biden, his record on the economy. And I'll play you some of my opening statement. Maybe we'll play the whole opening statement on that. But the gist of it was, I'm not just blaming Biden. I also blame Trump. I also blame Republicans. Let's not kid ourselves, there were Republicans and Trump that paid lip service to lockdowns. Trump did as well. There were Republicans signed off on the massive spending bills. Trump signed it. I'm blaming lockdowns and massive money printing. To me, that was predictably devastating for the economy and a large transfer of wealth from poor and working class people to the upper class. That's what happened. It's what I predicted would happen. That's exactly what happened. It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out this. If you lock down the economy for large sectors, that inevitably there will be incredible consequences. And then if you increase the money supply by 25 to 50%, that's going to cause inflation. This is not hard to understand. So that was my take. I wasn't exclusively blaming Biden, but certainly Biden and the Democrats were the cheerleaders of those policies the most, and they deserve blame for them as well. Econoboy kind of surprised me a little. I thought that his take would be, no, inflation wasn't because of those things. It was because of COVID. But he admits it wasn't COVID. It was lockdowns. It was the response to COVID, which is true. And that is largely the economic woes that we're suffering. But the other part of it that's also important, I don't know if it's equally important, but it's definitely significant, is the massive money printing. You stop the economy, you massively print money, it causes inflation. Because we are on the Crucible, Andrew doesn't really like us talking about COVID on there because you'll get banned from YouTube. So we didn't talk much on lockdowns. So the debate was centered, which to me, that was the entire debate. Here's a guy who claims to have degrees in economics, who claims to be well respected in the field of economics, who cheered on lockdowns. And now the policies he advocated for leaves us in the terrible economic situation we're in. He admitted, as an economist, the policies he advocated for are to blame for the terrible economic situation. That's it. That's the debate. That's what the experts brought to the table. Me, the layman, said, no, don't do that. And they said, yeah, Econoboy. And they said, what do you want, grandma to die? Not saying Econoboy specifically said that about grandma, but that's what the economic experts were saying. Many of them. So that was the entire debate. So that's why he argued, sure, printing money has some impact on inflation, but not much. It was marginal. That was, what's up, Aftershock? And also, Galil, what's up? C, PM, No Bull Savage, great to see you all. Deadly Waffles, sorry if I missed anyone. Thanks so much. Cool Jack, appreciate you. So that was the debate. And so if we were allowed to talk about COVID, I would have just the whole debate been like, okay, so you admit that the plans you advocated for and Biden advocated for are responsible for the economic woes we're facing. Yeah, there were multiple planks of it, but if you think it was all the lockdown and I think it was lockdown and money printing, either way, those are both Biden policies that he cheered for and the Democrats cheered for. Okay, that's the debate. So that's why this discussion, because what he was saying was, oh no, most experts say that it wasn't that big of a deal. And one by one experts, even Democrats, have come out recently saying, of course, these massive spending bills helped spur on inflation. And here we have Dem Whip Clyburn saying, well, we knew when we were injecting all this money that it was going to cause prices to rise. Now, Econoboy's excuse is going to be like, well, of course it would. I just don't think it was significant. Right? He just thinks that was a little part of it. I disagree. And the idea that all the experts, he kept talking about a consensus of experts or, I think that's just, it's wrong. Like, what's up, Maurice? It was obvious, as predicted, that this sort of policy, massively spending money after these lockdowns, would, in fact, cause inflation. And some of the things I talked about was, look, I wasn't even necessarily opposed with sending people a stimulus check, but that's where it drew the line for me. The bill should have been 1 to 3 pages long. We'll give everyone $1,500. Instead, we gave the equivalent of like $9,500, and you only got a check for like $1,500. Now your tax dollars paid for that other $7,000 or $8,000, whatever it was. I don't have the exact numbers. And what did you have to show for it? Well, a huge transfer of wealth from the poor and working class. Paying twice as much for gas, paying out the nose for eggs and milk and diesel fuel and furniture and home, mortgage rates rising through the roof. That's what you got to show for it. That's what I was fearing. And I'm like, I didn't want to spend this massive amount of money, but if you're going to lock people down and through no fault of their own, they can't work anymore, then okay, if you're going to send money, then send it directly to them. Don't have 1,000-page bills that there ends up being all sorts of fraud, money being kicked back to all sorts of people, it going to all sorts of wealthy people, and the poor and working class are left in the lurch, as is always the case. That was my problem. So that's what I said about Clyburn. And then Econoboy and me had some discussion about it. I just said to him, I was told by a guy well respected in the field of economics, Econoboy, that in fact adding money would not cause inflation. Weird how Clyburn is claiming they all knew that it would. And Econoboy says, no one said printing money, deficit spending doesn't cause upward pressure on prices. It's a cost-benefit analysis of that upward pressure and what other factors combine to cause the final headline rate. If you want to talk about this again, let me know. And I said, you're changing your tune. You said money printing didn't have a big impact on inflation. How's your prediction that inflation wouldn't be a problem by the end of the year coming? And Econoboy, we'll see what he says to me. He says, big impact does not equal impact. You're the one changing your statement. I believe my exact statement was we would see disinflation by the end of 2022, which is what's happening currently. You predicted inflation would be in double digits. Who is more correct? I don't remember predicting inflation would be in double digits. Depends on the metrics we see. It absolutely is, though. And Sparky, my friend Sparky, who I did the stream with last night, says, actually, it's not happening. In fact, inflation will rise with the current diesel shortage announced today. Even with cleaning out strategic petroleum reserves, the Biden administration cannot help but contribute even more to inflation. The disinflation claim you claim is imaginary. So that's where we were. Now, Pisco jumps in. And don't worry, we're going to go to the tape as well. Pisco says, quotes from your conversation with Econoboy, quote, inflation will start to come down and in line with reasonable expectations probably in 8 to 12 months. He states not saying inflation will be totally solved by the time the year rolls around or by the end of the year. Any response, would you like timestamps? I said, LOL. He says he would be surprised if inflation is around 8%, which he did. He says it'll probably fall to 7 or 6 or something like that, and they'll declare I said that they'll probably fall to 7 or 6%. Or something like that, and they'll declare victory. That's exactly what's happening now. I'll take a brief moment here to explain this. So I do say this in my closing statements at the Crucible debate. That inevitably what would happen is this. And this is complicated, but consider this. Inflation is usually, the number we see is usually year to year. sometimes month to month, but usually year to year. So when you hear like inflation is up 6.5%, that would be like from the data we have from June 2021 to June 2022. So whatever the baseline changes all the time. The baseline changes to what was it a year ago today, right? So let's look at it to simplify it as much as possible. Let's say that $1 bought one hot dog, right? Or let's make it simple. $1 bought a half gallon of milk. I know that's ridiculous. It hasn't been that way for a long time, but let's just, for simplification, $1, 1/2 gallon of milk. So we'll measure in half gallon of milk. So let's say in 2020, when Biden's sworn in office, $1 equals 1/2 gallon of milk. All right. Now, if I told you at the end of 2 years that it would take $5 to get 1/2 gallon of milk, that means that a half gallon of milk is 5 times more expensive. That means that inflation's gone up 500%, right? That's what that would mean. For where we're at now, for 2 years, let's say, I said 2 years into Biden's presidency. So he's sworn in January. So from January 2020 to January 2022, the inflation would go up 500%. That $1 used to buy you half gallon of milk. Now $5 will buy you a half gallon of milk, right? Now, that would be terrible. We would say that is horrific. That is historic inflation. That's really bad. Now, let's say that the way we looked at this, we looked at it year to year. And say in scenario 1, we looked at it and said, year 1, the price went up $2. So year to year, inflation went from $1 getting half gallon of milk costing $1 to half gallon costing $3. That's really bad. That means it went up, 200%, right? That's bad, right? And then the second year, it does the same. It goes from $3 a gallon to $5 a gallon. What that would look like would be inflation went up 200% year 1, went up 200% year 2, right? So we would say that's bad. Inflation's continued to rise 200%, right? But let's say in scenario 2, on year 1, so 1 year in office, it jumps. 1/2 gallon of milk jumps to $4.95. So that's almost a 400% increase. But then year 2, it goes from $4.95 to $5 a gallon. Now, in both scenarios, after 2 years, milk cost you 5 times more. In scenario 1, it was evenly split. It was just as bad year 1 as year 2. But in scenario 2, they'll claim victory because they'll say, see, we've handled inflation. It only went up 5 cents. This year was great. Well, that's small comfort to you as the taxpayer. In both scenarios, at the end of year 2, you're paying the same amount of money. When you go to buy groceries, that's what you're paying. But based on the way we measure that, if we just show year to year, because it only went from $4.95 to $5, that looks like inflation was very small. And so what I said was the way that the Biden administration and the economists and the hacks and the media, the propagandists, etc., will eventually declare victory is it's going to be hard to keep inflation running at 8% year to year. And here's why. Because the baseline is already so high because the year-to-year inflation before that was really high. So when you look at these numbers and you see like 6%, so let's just hypothetically, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Maybe we'll pull them up here later, right? But let's say that in January 2020, when Biden's sworn in, right, the economic numbers were really good. Inflation had been really low going into that. And so if prices went up 5%, that still wouldn't be the baseline was low. If milk starts off $5 a gallon and it goes up 5%, and it goes up 5 cents, that's small inflation. But if it starts off at $2 a gallon and goes up to $5.05, that's a lot of inflation. So people could say, well, originally these numbers, right, they went up because the economy was doing so good. Okay. But what happens the next year? That's when it becomes very troubling. When inflation was already high the year before and it's going high again. That's what's troubling. And I said, it's going to be hard to keep that trend. As bad as Biden is, as bad as these people running the economy is, it's very unlikely that we double inflation like every year, that it's going to go up 10% every year. Like that's very unlikely, right? So your gas prices, for example, might double. You might have went from paying an average of like $2.35 under Trump to now you're paying $5 a gallon. But the chance that next year that it doubles again and goes to $10 a gallon, probably not that high. It might go to $6 a gallon, and they'll say, see, look, inflation's much better. Last year it went up 100%, but this year it only went up 15%. See, we're doing good. But no, that's still terrible. And I said, that's how they'll eventually get. It's so bad right now. The numbers are so bad, historic highs in many senses, that they'll declare victory just because this rate of 10% inflation is probably, even if you're managing terribly, hard to continue to achieve. You'd almost have to purposely try. Right, inflation's compounding. Right, and for a layman like me. So that's what I said would happen. And that's exactly what Econoboy's rationale is here. He's saying, oh, no, I said that we'd see disinflation. And so basically what they're saying is like when Biden was saying the other day, a couple months ago, inflation's 0%. Right, month to month, it was 0%. It was prices were already really high, and they didn't increase or decrease for a month. And he's like, aha, see? 0% inflation. But that's not the victory that he claims. But that's eventually how they'll declare victory. And they do this with a lot, like for example, deficit spending, they do this. So if in 1 year, Trump spends $1 trillion beyond our budget, and then the next year he spends $500 billion, he just cut the deficit in half. He still spent $500 billion we didn't have and added to the national debt, but it cut the deficit in half. And that's one of the things Biden's bragged about, right? Oh, I cut the deficit. Right, because they spent huge amounts of money. I'm blaming Trump and Republicans as well because of COVID, right? So they were doing that in 2020. And then 2021, if they pull back a little, it's like, see, we cut the deficit. They're still spending huge amounts of money. And this is something that you see particularly Democrats. I was talking last night to someone before the show with Sparky about this, where they're like, well, I don't see what the problem is sending hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine. We basically piss money away everywhere else. Right. That's the argument that sort of establishment people end up making. Right. And I liken it to the skit, The Early Boy, right, on SNL, where it's like, let me house sit your house. Oh, you already let me house sit your house. Let me sleep in your bed. You already let me sleep in your bed. Let me move in with you. Right? It's like, it's that type of mentality. You already let us piss away a bunch of money. You might as well leave us piss away some more. And then if we're like, okay, go ahead. And they'll say, well, look, now you let us piss away a whole bunch. So now we might as well piss a whole bunch more away. That's sort of the defense that they'll use. And so that's, predictably, I knew that that's what people like Econoboy would do, that eventually they'll say, oh, inflation, it was 8.5%, but now it's only 6%. So we're winning. Even though it's up 20% 2 years over 2 years since Biden's been in office, that's winning. So I knew that's what would happen. But let's get to Pisco's part of this, because he's going to come in white knight. And he says, inflation will start to come down probably in the next 8 to 12 months. So we read that. He said, any response? I said, sure. He says he wouldn't be surprised. He would be surprised if inflation's around 8%. We got there. So should be surprised. I said it'll probably fall to 7 or 6 or something, and they'll declare victory. That's what he's doing. He says, okay, but to be clear, your specific allegation that Econoboy said it wouldn't be a problem, that specific claim is incorrect. Now, what Pisco's trying to do here. Now, Pisco no doubt saw the debates. That's why he's chiming in here. And what he's trying to do is win on a technicality, on a semantic, because I said that, hey, Econoboy, how's your prediction going that inflation wouldn't be a problem? He's like, well, technically, Econoboy never said those specific words. So even if he was massively incorrect about his predictions, he never said the specific words, inflation wouldn't be a problem. And this is technically true. He did not verbatim say those words, but I'll get to what he implied as far as I'm concerned and what was fair. Now, to be clear, on this particular technicality, anyone could hypothetically win that argument. You would never be able to say inflation won't be a problem, because you could advocate that inflation and deflation are always potential problems. And no matter if you have perfect economic management, inevitably you're probably likely to see some amount of inflation and some amount of deflation, and some amount of either of those could technically be considered somewhat a problem. So the quote problem would never fully be eliminated of something like inflation. That is clearly not the thrust of what we're talking about. What we're talking about is whether it's a big issue that's massively hurting Americans. For example, you could look at a chart of inflation. Maybe I'll pull it up later. Year over year, very rarely is inflation 0%. It's almost naturally always occurring somewhat 1% to 2%, something like that. You could theoretically say, well, that's a problem for some people. So there is technically a problems that still subsist even in good economic times with small amounts of inflation. So it completely being eliminated, but that's what Pisco's going for. He never said that inflation would completely be eliminated. Therefore, you're characterizing this improperly. And so what I'm going to do is show clips of what Econoboy actually said. I said those weren't his exact words, but it was the implication. He said people based on experts were predicting 2% of inflation. And inflation would largely be mitigated by the end of 2022. So far, he's wrong. And Pisco just says, but he didn't say that it would be eliminated. And that's true. Pisco, or Econoboy specifically says, I'm not saying inflation, the entire problem of inflation will be wiped out. I'm just saying experts are looking at it about 2%, which it's been incredibly higher than 2%, 7, 8%. So 2% is just completely wrong, but that's what he suggested. But yeah, he did preface that by saying, I'm not saying that inflation will be completely solved. The problem of inflation will be completely solved. But as I said, that it's clear that that's not the implication of what either of us were saying. We're saying, is it going to be a problem that people are massively worried about? He was saying that it's going to be significantly mitigated. I say around the 4:30-10 minute in that video, he says that he has faith that they'll be able to mitigate the problem of inflation heading into 2022. Then says, not saying inflation's not going to be a problem that is completely solved, or it's not going to be a problem that's completely solved, but does not think it's a problem that'll be long term. And I'll play the clip. That's what he says. And then Pisco just says, but technically, that's not saying it wouldn't be a problem, right? That's what Pisco says. See, that's semantic. And that's the legalese hack that Pisco is. This is the same guy that has no problem with the FBI using unverified opposition research, spied or paid for by the Hillary Clinton camp, sourced by Russian individuals to spy on a president to get a warrant 4 times. You don't have a problem with it. He'll say, yeah, I guess I have a problem. What should we do about it now? Anyways, moving on. Didn't have a problem with it at the time. He has no problem with no one being charged with deleting subpoenaed evidence. That's who he is. This is how he talks. This is how partisan hacks talk. They try to find these semantic arguments and things like that to be able to deflect from the thrust of what's going on. The thrust of what's going on is this. Econoboy said in 2000, at the end of 2021, that he did not anticipate inflation being a long-term problem. He thought that it would be taken care of in 2022. He said that experts were predicting something like 2% inflation. He said that he had trust that our institutions would significantly mitigate it by the end of the year. None of that has occurred. The exact opposite has occurred. Those were his predictions. The opposite has occurred. And Pisco ignores all of that and tries to say, but technically he never said the entire problem of inflation would be solved. That's what he's doing. A couple more lines here. Oops, sorry. It says inflation expectation is 2%. So yes, I feel my characterization was correct. He didn't use the words, it won't be a problem. He used the words, has faith the problem will be mitigated with expectations around inflation of 2%. We are currently at 8.2% inflation year to year. I say, in addition, in this clip at the 1320 mark, says inflation will be a 2022 problem that will probably see resolution by the end of the year. I said he says inflation is a 2022 problem that will probably see the resolution by the end of the year. It means I was correct to say he was saying inflation wouldn't be a problem by the end of the year. So you were wrong, correct? He says, I was misquoting and misrepresenting. When you use quotes, make sure they're actually quotes. Indicate any omissions or change of words. Why don't you provide the actual real quote instead of your fake quote? I said, I provided the clip, watch yourself. Also, he quoted, I'm not going to get into it, it's petty, but he quoted Econoboy up here where it says inflation will start to come down. That is not a direct quote. He missed several likes and ums. So Pisco, again, doing exactly what he's accusing me of. So what I claimed that Econoboy said was, in this quote, real quick, inflation is a 2022 problem that will probably see resolution by the end of the year. And he's upset because that's misquoting and misinterpreting. Here's the actual quote from Econoboy, quote, I'm pretty sure I did say that inflation would be kind of like a 2022 problem and that they would, we'd probably see some resolution at the end of 2022. Pisco's going to say, that's wrong. I admitted the word some. It's not a complete resolution. It's some resolution, consistent with his position in the first video. Second, I admitted key context from the quote where he was spitballing what his position was before. We know from the first video what his position was. It's inconsistent with what you said his position was and what it says now. So in other words, his quote where he says, I'm pretty sure that I said inflation would kind of be like a 2022 problem and that we would probably see some resolution at the end of 2022. Pisco saying it is inaccurate for me to say that he predicted that by the end of 2022, inflation wouldn't really be a problem because he only says we'd see some resolution. But it doesn't answer why he says that it would be a 2022 problem then. Why wouldn't he say it would be a problem in perpetuity with some resolution coming in 2022? But Pisco is going to say the use of the word some there means he's not saying that it's a problem that would be solved. This is so fucking stupid. And this is what hacks like Pisco do. So instead of saying, yeah, the thrust of what he was saying, it seems to be inaccurate at this point. He said that inflation would probably be around 2%, that it would be limited, and by the end of the year, it would probably have some sort of resolution to it. Oh, he used the word some resolution, so that doesn't mean that he was saying it would be dealt with. That's what Pisco's decided to hang his hat. And this is what happens when people that are experts in a field massively underperform on what their predictions are. So let's go through some of the timestamps and the quotes on this, if you don't mind. First timestamp. We'll play a little before he says it so you can get some context. And this is Econoboy, someone with degrees in the economy, arguing with me in December of 2021 about our predictions. I'm criticizing the Biden administration for things like lockdowns and massive money printing and these massive bills that they're passing through, saying that it'll cause inflation. And so he's going to explain to you what his prediction, this is December 2021. He's going to explain to you what his predictions going forward on inflation are. There's a good image of me, right? Oops. Come on. If I lose my job and I'm only making $100 a month next week or next month, the month after that, if I go to $1,000 a month, I just increased how much I was making tenfold. I had a 10 times increase in my economy. So when an economy crashes, there's going to be an initial period, but you would expect it to eventually have an uptick up. The same is true of Biden. Biden came in when we had a really great economy that was going, and then because of COVID, which Trump is partially responsible, but because of the disastrous policies under that, we saw an economic decline that was rapid. And yet, despite the fact that Biden had the tools to deal with COVID, at least the tools that he recommends, the vaccine, that's all he talks about, we ended up having disastrous economic policies that ended up mitigating that recovery to where people are now seeing the economic crunch. Now you're going to start to see people even more frustrated as they have to start paying their student loans back because you can only prop it up with that sort of stuff so long. So it is reality. The average person is suffering under this economy. Small businesses are suffering. People are becoming more reliant on the government and government programs, and it will result in a poorer situation for them.
Yeah, but I think by that logic, Biden wouldn't pause government deferment of student loans because he can ultimately just keep them going in perpetuity, right? But rather, Biden is appearing to signal that we're actually going to start paying back student loans in February, right? Which, according by your own narrative, that would be a good thing for him to do, because he's capturing money from the. Well, okay, then. Then that's a good thing that Biden's doing for the economy, right? And I'm just saying that by your narrative to be.
It's a good thing in the long term, but.
Yeah, just by your narrative, and it should be good. I'm not saying that that's a good thing, just by your narrative, though. And in general, though, I think you're also talking about the idea of, you're basically talking about what they would call demand pull inflation. The idea that you give people a bunch of money, but basically all this money is way more money than the economy's used to. They buy a bunch of stuff because everyone has more money. They're buying a bunch of stuff. Suppliers can't keep up. They raise prices. That's where the demand pull inflation comes from, right? But really, and that's a well-established economic phenomenon. It happened it happens in Venezuela. It happened in Chile. It's happened throughout the course of history, depending on the country. But that's not what is happening right now. What is happening now is the other side of that coin, which is supply push inflation, where because of sort of external supply chain costs that are being forced upon not consumers but producers, you're seeing the supply chain increase the costs of the broader economy, because a lot of those costs are being passed to consumers. Now, inflation in America is not 20%. It's not 30%, right? We don't even have stagflation right now, because stagflation is when unemployment is high and inflation is high. The reality is unemployment's low and inflation's high. This isn't even stagflation. What this is inflation going from 2% to 6%. Call it 7% at the end of the year if you want to be generous. At the end of the day. And that's ultimately an amount that's perfectly recoverable. This is like a quarter of this is a third the rate of inflation that we saw in the broader economy in the 1970s, and the Federal Reserve was able to rein that in. So I have a lot more trust in our institutions to be able to mitigate this problem heading into 2022. Not saying inflation will be a totally solved problem by the time the year rolls around, or even by the end of the year, but this is not a problem that I think will in the long term. Even inflation expectations haven't been de-anchored. People are still expecting 2% inflation, and that's because of the trust and strength of our institutions in general. But I don't. Did you want to talk about it? I feel like we're.
Did you hear that? Did you hear what his prediction was? There's a lot that he said there, right? Right. Let's go back. Let's play just a little bit. Listen, this last section. That's what you need to hear. Thanks,
inflation
gives
going from 2% to 6%. Call it 7% at the end of the year if you want to be generous.
We're over 7%. We're now at 8%. So we were 7% from year to year. This was December in 2021. Now it's gone up even beyond that, right? So year to year, we now see that it's like 8.2%, I think, the last amount of data we have. And I'll get to something more in a second.
At the end of the day, and that's ultimately an amount that's perfectly recoverable.
It's perfectly recoverable except to the people that are losing their homes right now. It's not recoverable to them, right? It might be recoverable in the long haul, but the people that are suffering now are real.
This is like a quarter of this is a third the rate of inflation that we saw in the broader economy in the 1970s, and the Federal Reserve.
That's not true, right? And so what happens is, and we get into this in the other debate, he does something very interesting. He talks, and you hear this a lot when people say, this is the worst inflation since 1980. But the problem is the metrics that we use for CPI to calculate inflation are massively different today than they were back in the 70s and 80s. And so when I bring that up in our next debate, he says, well, the way we calculate it now is better. Right, but even if you agree that when we're making comparisons, we should use the same metrics to make those comparisons. So we actually see that inflation is over 20% using those metrics. So when he goes back and says, oh, inflation in the 70s was 3 times worse. Well, if we were using the same metrics that we were using back then we would see this inflation's comparable or worse in many situations. I haven't looked at exactly what year from the 70s he's referencing here, but it's interesting how he goes back and forth on that. When it suits him, he'll compare inflation to back in the day. But when I bring up, well, the way we measure inflation is different, he goes, well, that's good. We shouldn't measure it in the ways we used to. And, it's not useful to compare inflation to what it was back in the day. So I just thought that was interesting. But listen, this is the important part at the end here. His prediction. Right. Again, this is December 15th, 2021. So let's hear what his prediction is going to be.
Reserve was able to rein that in. So I have a lot more trust in our institutions to be able to mitigate this problem heading into 2022. Not saying inflation will be a totally solved problem by the time,
Right. It's not going to be a totally solved problem. No one would say that. No one would ever say that ever inflation would be totally solved. But what he's doing is saying it won't really be a big issue, right, by the end of the year. Listen, this is what he says.
The year rolls around or even by the end of the year, but this is not a problem that I think will persist in the long term. Even inflation expectations haven't been de-anchored. People are still expecting 2% inflation, and that's because of the trust and strength of our institutions in general. But I don't.
He says that people are predicting 2% inflation. We're at 8.2. That's where we're at. Now, who could in good faith listen to that and say, oh, he wasn't saying that inflation wouldn't be a big problem by the end of 2022? That's what Pisco's trying to say. Well, he said there that it wouldn't be totally solved. Right. But he said that it would be significantly mitigated. People were expecting something like 2%. That's what he said. Now, that leads into our second debate. The world, because exporting dollars is what keeps our economy stable. And the last thing I'll say is that despite all of this, despite the fact that we'll be able to see sort of the shirking and blaming stuff, we can see if you massively increase how much you spend and lock down the economy, that there's going to be predictable economic devastation. I was right about this, not because I'm a genius, not because it's my area of expertise or I have degrees in it, because it made sense. And it's tragic to see so many of the people in the economic sector that said, what do you want, grandma to die? And instead initiated these disastrous policies that now the poor and working class are paying for. Now you'll see he's about to give his open statement where he talks about his prediction that he had. This is in March 18th. So we went from December 15th to, basically 4 months later, we're having this debate. So this was from this March 2022. And listen to what he says, because I said the reason this debate came about was basically Econoboy's prediction that by the end of the year, we would see inflation wouldn't be a long-term problem. There would be significant mitigations. This is what Econoboy says.
Thank you so much, Rob, for that opening statement. Econoboy, you're up. 7 minutes.
Alrighty, I've got 7 minutes. I'm going to try and do my best. Basically, so what I would say with regards to opening up this topic are a few things. So I'm honestly not sure what my exact quote was. I would say that I know that I said that inflation would come down in 2022, and I'm pretty sure I did say that inflation would be kind of a 2022 problem, and then we'd probably see some resolution at the end of 2022. Not necessarily sure how wrong that'll end up being. It depends. There's a lot of moving parts in the economy, and I think it was Unlearning Economics that said maybe during our conversation last week, I think is when he said that obviously predictions in economics are a bit of a fool's game. It's just a very hard thing to do. That doesn't excuse when predictions are wrong or anything like that.
Did you hear what he said? Well, I think I said basically that inflation would be a 2022 problem, and by the end of the year, we would see some sort of resolution of that. Okay. We're in October. Maybe he's right. Maybe come December, inflation will no longer be a problem. I hope he's right. But so far, it's not looking to be the case. Now, Pisco is going to argue semantics, right? That's what he's going to do. He's going to argue, instead of saying, geez, he said that basically people were expecting 2% inflation because they assumed that the institutions would deal with it. All of that was bullshit. Now, what's furthermore, in this Econoboy debate, one of the things that I think is absolutely amazing is we had this sort of thing that occurred where there was an excuse that was given to medical professionals, people like Dr. Fauci, when it came to trying to address COVID. And the excuse was this. Well, if you ask a virologist what a policy should be in regards to defending against a pandemic, they're going to give you a response that basically is putting as the highest or almost sole priority protecting from the pandemic. They're not necessarily going to be thinking, well, how will this affect children's education? How will it affect small businesses? How will it affect people's psychological health, right? they're experts in a particular field which tend to be hyper-focused on that field. And so people gave those like Dr. Fauci a pass when it was like, well, okay, the things they did may have had negative effects on these other aspects, but their goal is they're just focusing on the pandemic. But what about people whose field of expertise is economics? What about that? Well, you would expect that the economist would say, no, we're just going to make the decision that's best for the economy. Now, in the context of this debate, again, I'll re-explain what this second debate, and I'll put the link for you so you can all check it out for yourself. I'm not misleading you. I'm just not going to play a 2-hour debate here tonight. And this is from The Crucible, but it's also on my channel somewhere, but I don't mind you watching it in The Crucible. Give them some clicks. Andrew's very... doesn't like you talking about COVID on his channel, which makes it difficult to talk about sort of the economic problems we're having because so much of them come from the restrictions that we put in place in order to fight COVID. Lockdowns, things, massive spending. So it's difficult to tiptoe around COVID when having that. But one of the things that I was shocked was an admission in that debate that it wasn't COVID that was responsible for the economy. It was the lockdowns. It was the response to COVID. Great. I thought that's what the majority of the debate would be. And not only that, so he admits that the lockdowns and stuff caused the economic problem majoritarily. Other factors, but that was the majority of it. And he supported them. And so did many, many, many other economists. Now, how is that? Surely they knew that there would be massive economic consequences to this, but we didn't want grandma to die. Isn't that odd how it went the opposite way? And part of the debate was us arguing back and forth that I said they downplayed the economic damage of things like lockdowns. He said, no, they didn't. That's not true. No one was saying when they were embracing lockdowns, this is going to have we're going to be looking at huge amounts of inflation. We're going to be looking at huge amounts of small businesses closing. We're going to look at a huge amount of wealth transfer from the poor and working class to the upper class. No one was saying that. That wasn't the message the politicians, the media, and the economists were putting out. In fact, I even later in that debate show him economists that were saying we need to lock down more. But he was trying to say, no one was saying that. No one was downplaying the economic consequences of lockdowns. But nonetheless, he admits that lockdowns caused this. He admits that he cheered for lockdowns. He just says that he thinks lockdowns were worth it. They weren't. That's what I wanted the debate to be, but because we're on The Crucible on YouTube, we couldn't really talk about that. So then the second part became how significant were massive printing of money, and we decided to use the M2 money supply, which was basically like money created on like Fed sheet, to which 25% increase in the total supply since Biden took office. My argument was that amount would have a significant effect on inflation. His argument was that would not, because of the velocity of spending of money, was his argument. It's a stupid argument that he's making. That's what the back and forth was. And this is why I'm saying, okay, we'll see. We'll see what bears out, right? If he's right, then we wouldn't have seen inflation. That's why I asked him in December. That's what the debate was. Okay, we started doing it in December of 2021. We had these bills that were just being passed. And he was saying, no. Most of the experts are saying it won't have. Now we see even Democrat experts and Democrat think tanks saying, yeah, of course, this massive spending did help cause inflation. He admits it caused part of it, but says it was a very minute part of the inflation. And that's what the debate was. And so, when judging which of us were correct, okay, what are the results? Well, he predicted, because these sorts of things wouldn't lead to inflation, that we would see by a resolution of most of this by the end of 22. It was transitory. That's what he said. That's what all the experts were telling us. Except it wasn't. Now, I know what he's going to say. But Russia. That's why, just like Biden. That's what these experts do. Always pass the buck. So I'm sure I'll be talking to Econoboy in the future, and I'll predict that's exactly what he'll say. He'll say, oh, there are other things that happen in the world, and there's inflation going on around the world. Right, the Russia thing. Right. Maybe that has something to do with it. However, that's still policies of Democrats, Biden, people in our institutions that instead of making us energy independent, made us rely on places like Russia, and then intentionally antagonized Russia, which had predictable results, which now we suffer economically for. Again, the people that are managing this economy are, in my opinion, purposely mismanaging it because it's leading to a massive wealth transfer from the poor and working class to the upper class. And they want people reliant on the government. And that's, I'm not saying Econoboy is nefarious, but that's also what Econoboy wants. He wants massive socialist policies. He wants more people reliant on the government. And so these policies, even if he wouldn't agree with people going broke, the end result will be what he wants. People become less self-sufficient, more reliant on the government. And he's going to constantly make excuses for it. Constantly. Now, some of the criticisms of me, where there were other people hemming and hawing at me on Twitter. I think Old Scotty, who's in here, maybe was one of them. I could be wrong, but I think he was. Saying, but one-sided, just blaming Biden. I'll play you my opening statement from that debate. You be the judge. Did I just blame Biden? And through the context of that, Econoboy seemed to...
So that we can get to the Q&A. Of course, super chats are always welcome here, and they will be adhered
We'll speed it up a little.
Sometimes people want to steer the conversation in the debate, and if you send a large enough...
And through the context of that, Econoboy seemed to suggest that inflation really wouldn't be... You take umbrage with me saying how disastrous that Biden's economy has been. Spoiler alert, it has been disastrous. It's continuing to get worse. But the topic of inflation came up, and through the context of that, Econoboy seemed to suggest that inflation really wouldn't be a big deal by the end of 2022. I said, we'll see. I'll be happy to have that conversation with you. It came up this week that we're having the conversation now that Janet Yellen, the Fed chairman, came out and said she expects really bad inflation to continue throughout the year of 2022. The inflation numbers we've seen have been abysmal, 7.9 year to year this month or in the month of February, though those CPI numbers are actually going to be far less than the way we used to calculate it. If we use the calculations we had back in the early 80s, it looks like inflation would be closer to 14 or 15% year to year, which shows how disastrous it is. That inflation is going to have a grosser impact on the poor and the working class who spends a larger percentage of their money and their income on things like gasoline and groceries that we've seen massively going. Who's at fault for inflation? Well, there are things that Biden's responsible for, and there are things that aren't just Biden. The first reason for this was we had an ailment, and as a result of that ailment, we had lockdowns. People want to blame the ailment for poor economic conditions. The ailment did not cause the poor economic conditions. It was the policies we issued as a result of that, not just in the United States, but worldwide. For example, most of the supply chain lockdowns and things we see were because working class people weren't working as much. But when you looked at the ailment specifically, it wasn't really targeting in horribly severe ways people of a working age, the population that was of the working age. So by forcing productive people to stop and to lock down, and then by injecting a bunch of money into the economy, you started to see the crazy inflation that we're seeing. In addition, and I'm sure Econoboy will bring this up, when you lock down and then open up, in addition to inserting all this money, demand is going to be very high, but the production hasn't caught up with it because of the lockdown. And so when you have high demand and low production, you're likely to see things like inflation as well. Another reason that Biden's not exclusively to blame is our reliance on imports in the United States. That's why you'll see a part of the reason that inflation is much worse in the United States than in almost every other G20 country, except countries like Russia, Brazil, Turkey, that we don't want to be in the same sentence of when we're talking about inflation or economic pressures. And also it's because the Fed has continued to keep interest rates at zero. This has basically led to an increase in supply of money. In order to solve inflation, they're going to have to massively raise the rates. Thanks,
and
by
Bill.
raising the rates, what will
What
happen
was
is
that
that's
then?
probably going to cause a recession, stock market losses, and things like
Thank
that,
you,
which will end
Bill.
up hurting poor people as well. But maybe it'll be a more equitable harming because it will also harm wealthy people. So it's really bad.
Really
Biden himself is to blame through things of commission and omission. The commission is all of those policies I talked about. Biden's been in office 47 years, and him and his party and the establishment have endorsed all of those and have been the leaders in that, especially the spending. His $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, people tried to compare it to the stimulus that we saw in 2009. However, when you looked at the potential output versus actual output, basically what we saw was the stimulus under Obama was about half of what the deficit between the actual output and potential output of the economy was, whereas the American Rescue Plan is 6 times higher than the deficit of that. And so that's obviously going to risk inflation by injecting so much money. We paid workers to stay at home, which was a pro. The Build Back Better, the massive spending that we saw with that was a massive part of this. And also his signals to the energy industry that relies on futures markets and tea leaf reading that he was going to collapse energy markets, exacerbated energy prices, which affects almost everything in the economy, which also caused massive price increases and inflation. The Fed bet we could use all sorts of voodoo, jargonistic terms and things like that. The reality is this: when Biden was sworn in office, these numbers are in millions. We had $4.1 and change million in the federal balance sheet. Today we have over double that, which is 8.9 and change. So when you double the amount of things on the Fed balance sheet, you can't be surprised when you start to see this crazy inflation. We already talked about how inflation hurts the poor and working class. And remember, Econoboy's statement, what he says here is he originally said that he did not anticipate that inflation would really be a problem or that it would be going down by the end of 2022. We'll see people like, I don't know if he'll do this, but we see Biden trying to blame Russia. All of the numbers I talked about were from February before Russia invaded. Russia's invasion might make energy prices and things like that worse. Another reason that Biden, Democrats, and even Republicans that did not allow us to be energy independent are to blame, because it is predictable if you rely on nefarious state actors like Russia for so much of your economy and things like that, that inevitably if things go wrong, it's going to harm the economy. In addition, we see that the petrodollar may be ending. It looks like there could be a block coming up of China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, UAE, India, and others that are going to compete against the petrodollar. If that happens, the disastrous spending policies that I believe people like Econoboy have supported will be even worse, because people will not have faith in the dollar. And that means that when you artificially double the supply within a 2-year period, that will show all across the world, because exporting dollars is what keeps our economy stable. And the last thing I'll say is that despite all of this, despite the fact that we'll be able to see sort of the shirking and blaming stuff, we can see if you massively increase how much you spend and lock down the economy, that there's going to be predictable economic devastation. I was right about this, not because I'm a genius, not because it's my area of expertise or I have degrees in it, because it made sense. And it's tragic to see so many of the people in the economic sector that said, what do you want grandma to die? And instead initiated these disastrous policies that now the poor and working class are paying for. So, and I said in my previous debate, I blamed Trump, Republicans as well that supported lockdowns, that supported massive spending bills. It's one of the things that I criticized Trump for his entire 4 years in office. It's one of the things that I saw hypocrites on the right, people, for example, that were Tea Party people that used to complain about deficit spending and the national debt, that all of a sudden had no problem when Trump was massively spending money. That is wrong. I called it out. I absolutely did. And so any claims that, oh, I'm just being partisan and I'm just, trying to blame solely Biden and Democrats is not true. You could go back and watch my live videos back in March of 2020 where I'm criticizing Trump heavily for endorsing lockdowns. He was excoriating Georgia and Governor Brian Kemp because he said Kemp wasn't doing lockdowns as much. Thanks so much, Bill. I really appreciate it. He was excoriating Sweden for saying they didn't lock down hard enough. He signed these massive 1,000-page spending bills that spent trillions of dollars. Republicans signed off on it. I was doing entire shows about how spineless and hypocritical the Republicans were for signing off on these spending bills. Everyone who watches me can see I was doing that in real time, right? Yeah, it's fair to ask the question, Old Scotty, but I'm telling you, that's just the truth. My criticism is not, oh, a Democrat did this, so I'm pissed. I was against the lockdowns and the way that these spending bills occurred. Now, having said that, I did give this caveat. Even though I'm against massive government spending bills, if you're going to force people out of work through no fault of their own, this isn't people weren't employed, even through things like disabilities or through things like unemployment. This was people literally saying, I want to go to work today. And we had governors saying, you can't go. You can't. You're non-essential. Then those people, through no fault of their own, no longer have an income because the government forced them to not have an income. Then I could see sending them a stimulus. But my issue was always, it was never about just keeping those people on their feet. Because if it was, the bill that sent them a stimulus wouldn't have spent on average $9,000 per person and only given them $1,500. And it wouldn't have been thousands of pages that had a bunch of nonsense in it that had nothing to do with keeping people through these lockdowns. That was my criticism. I didn't want to lock down in the first, but you see how this, what do they call it? Like dialectics, right? Create the problem and then create the solution, which is also beneficial to you. Oh, we locked down, sorry. Now us massive government big spender people say, you have to give us more power to spend even more money to solve the problem. And predictably, the net result, regardless of what you want to say, it is indisputable that the net result of this was that working class, average, and poor people were harmed significantly, and people at the top tier of our economy on average did very well. That there was a large transfer of wealth from the poor and working class to the upper class. And instead of those people that supported these policies, like almost all the Democrats did, but there were Republicans that supported them too, instead of them saying, wow, we really screwed up here, because it was intentional in my opinion, they say, you know what the problem is? You need to give us more power, more spending, more authority. That's what my entire beef with this was. And my beef with Econoboy is this. I don't think Econoboy is the worst person in the world. I don't even think that he's someone who wants to see people intentionally suffer. I think that he is rooting for people that do. I think he's rooting for people that want people to become less self-sufficient, rely on the government to usher in their sort of establishment type of globalism. I don't know that Econoboy is that. I don't know enough about him. And I'll admit that I'm more hostile than Econoboy in our interactions. I don't think it was over the top or anything. And I actually enjoy talking to Econoboy. I think that he's a smart person. He's better than some of these morons I talk to, most of them, to be honest. But I like talking to people in their area of expertise. And once more, I showed that as a layman, I was absolutely correct in my predictions, and he was absolutely wrong. And he'll make excuses and he'll say, just like I said there, just like I said in our March debate, he's going to say, but Russia, it's Russia. That's exactly what he'll say. It's not these policies' fault. It's a bunch of other stuff. That's it. You can judge for yourself. I know he did a live stream today, and I know part of his live stream, I heard a little of it was me calling him a hack and things like that. I go back and forth. I'm passionate. Again, I don't think Econoboy's a bad person. I think that he's so partisan, he can't admit that he was wrong and that these policies were disastrous. He can't admit it. And it allows him to sort of obfuscate and be a clever debater about things and rewrite history. Oh no, they were telling us how devastating lockdowns would be economically. No one was downplaying it. That's just bullshit. Yeah, actually, the subscriber goal for 2,000 is Saturday before the election. I'm going to do a 24-hour stream. So that's the goal. If I get to 2,000, I'm going to do it even if I don't get to 2,000. But I will admit this, Econoboy is someone who definitely is read up on economic theory and can talk the talk. And, you know, here's the thing. It sounds persuasive. Yeah, I liken it to a car mechanic, right? And I even say that at one point at this debate. Let's say you go into a mechanic and the mechanic tells you, like, your vehicle needs a new alternator. And you're like, oh, yeah, I've replaced one of those before, $400, you know? And he's like, nah, this one's going to be $4,000. And you're like, really? Why? And he rattles off 20 minutes of, well, you know, manufacturers in 2018 started doing blah, 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 blah. And he goes on this very technical, and you could be like, oh. At the end of the day, you're still like, I don't believe you. I don't believe you that this part went from $400 to $4,000. Now, if I'm trying to convince Bill or if I'm trying to convince Aircraft Sparky, Econoboy, or the mechanic in this case, might sound like, wow, they sound like they know their stuff way more. But sometimes, you know, one of my favorite quotes in the movie JFK, the Oliver Stone movie, Kevin Costner's playing a lawyer and they're kind of relitigating the magic bullet theory. Oh, Anonymous, we did. Thank you so much. We did it. Anonymous crushes it. We did it. 2,000 subs. Woo! Thank you so much. 20 subs. Incredibly generous. Well, we did it. Well, I was just bullshitting. I wasn't going to do that 24-hour show if I didn't get 2,000, but now I am. Thank you so much, Anonymous. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone that's been a subscriber. That's actually an incredible achievement for me. I don't do this for money. The money is nice. I need to buy a new computer, so that's part of where this money will be going. And don't get me wrong. If I got 100,000 subs today, I'd be damn pleased. Don't get me wrong. But I do this as a hobby, and it is incredibly humbling that anyone watches me, let alone donates money to me. And I do really appreciate it. I honestly do. That's a great achievement for me. We'll reset that. We'll come up with a new goal after we do the 24-hour stream. Yeah, Bill's not going to donate 100,000 subs. Pick up a second job, Bill. Come on, you. But no, that's incredibly generous. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Old Scotty says that's because a lot of mechanics are thieves. Right. A lot of people are partisan. Like, for example, a lot of people, Pfizer could probably, a CEO from Pfizer could probably talk a better game than me on the need to vaccinate a 3-year-old with their vaccine, right? But they also have an incentive to do so. You'll get there, Sparky. I love your show. Yeah, so yeah, you have to take into account just because expertise is something that should be factored in, but we shouldn't default to experts to the point where we lose common sense. Oh, the experts said that locking down and massively printing money, it wouldn't really harm the economy that much. It'd be all right. It'd be transitory. Bullshit. Oh, the experts said that the virus couldn't have came from China. Bullshit. The experts said that you couldn't go to work, but you can go to a Black Lives Matter rally. Bullshit. I don't know what to say. Yeah, I'm sure a doctor could sit here and be like, but let me explain to you how it attacks the respiratory system and does this and this. And like, when you're looking at this furin cleavage site and it's able to actually infect your lungs through this, and this situation, that's why it's okay to go to a Biden rally and not a Trump rally. Yeah, bullshit. I don't believe you. I just don't. Right, it's hard to be an expert on a black swan once in a generation event. But even still, you could say I'm an economics expert. And if you say I'm an economics expert and I don't think doubling our money supply would have any inflationary pressure, would have significant inflationary pressure, I don't believe you. Because everything we know about that sort of event leads you to believe that it would have inflationary pressures. If you say locking down the economy wouldn't have a big economic impact, I don't believe you. Even if it's in response to a once-in-a-generation event or once-in-a-lifetime event. These are bold claims that go against what average knowledge is on these sorts of issues. And so you have to, with these bold claims, you have to have bold proof. You have to have exceptional proof, and they had none. And it turns out, okay, how did it end up? Well, here we are. The same people that kept telling us inflation would be transitory and that massively spending money wouldn't harm. Here we are. They were wrong. And instead of saying, yeah, we were wrong, they're like, yeah, but it's Russia's fault. It's a bunch of faults that's not ours. Right, Garlic Press says it better than I could. I'm not an economics expert, but shutting down the country, shutting down businesses, and then putting money to pay people to sit at home may have led to inflation. Right. That's what I'm saying. And then someone says, no, you don't understand the equation. It's the amount of money plus the velocity of money divided by the amount of, bullshit. It's just bullshit. I was right. I debated the experts that told me, I'm a student of virology. I have degrees in virology. I debated them on a bunch of shit with COVID. I was right. I debated the economic experts on the lockdowns and the money printing. I was right. And what am I an expert on? Sitting on my fat ass and midnight snacking. I'll guarantee I won't lose that debate. Bill says inflation's because January 6th. True. And again, real quick, the last thing I'll say on the economics, and then we'll move on, not the last, second to last thing, is what they want you, when you listen to Biden talk about this, it's not even a message. I go back and forth between they're so stupid or they just have such hubris because they feel like again, now I'm going to get a little windy here. People talk about privilege a lot. I used to have these debates a lot where people would talk about white privilege and things like that. And the truth of the matter is, as I've said about all that, you do have privilege from being in any of these groups. You also have times when it's a detriment. Sometimes being white's a privilege. Sometimes it's being a detriment. Maybe in this country, because it's majoritarily white, on average, it's more privilege than detriment. That could be true, but it just depends. If I get pulled over by a police officer, maybe it's a privilege to be white. If I'm trying to apply for a scholarship at a university and all things being equal with someone who's black, probably advantageous to be black. It's the way it is. We're all very lucky to be alive at this time in this country, and especially if you're relatively healthy. But I have privilege in other ways. Like I have family that loves me. I have parents that took care of me. I have friends that are great and opportunities. But not many of them are being white that I know of. But one of the privileges that I definitely have that seems counterintuitive is being conservative in a space where there were a lot of left-wing people. My friend Bill that's in the chat, he's someone I know in real life. He debated with me as well. I hope he doesn't mind me saying that. I'm not going to say his real name. Maybe his name's not Bill. Maybe his name's Seth. Who knows? But, I might be more conservative than Bill. I don't know. I'd say Bill leans conservative libertarian as well. But both of us, when we go into the debate community that's super left, right? Every position we had, these aren't dumb people. Some of these people are, I would say we'd both agree, smarter than us, at least traditionally smarter. We debated people that had perfect SAT scores. People with photographic memories. You'd be talking about a book that you read on Aegis missile defense systems or something. They'd be like, actually on page 300 something. You'd be like, holy shit, how do you know this stuff? These aren't dumb people. Some were, but many weren't, right? And every little thing we said, if it came to outside the area of debate or even in debate, where we said we believe in freedom, we believe in sort of libertarian principles, we believe in conservatism, we were shot down. And so we had to get effective at being able to, okay, here's how we defend our argument. It shaped how we looked at life. That's an advantage. That's a privilege. Because so many people that are left-wing people go through life with every place they've ever interacted with agreeing with them. Probably have that situation at home where people are agreeing with them. They go to school. Most educators lean left-wing. They go to university. It's even worse. Their favorite entertainer and things like that on TV probably share their beliefs. And so that's why when they get into the realm of having to discuss with people complicated topics, they just fall apart. Now, not all of them, but many of them. And now I bring this up because, to me, I don't know if it's arrogance, stupidity, or the fact that they just never had anyone challenge them. But when you hear the Biden administration bragging about the economy, it's unreal. Like the effective message, like just the smart message, if you're just looking at it strategically to win elections, the smart message is something like this. We understand that this economy is devastating for many people. There are people struggling mightily. We get that. Now, most of that's outside of our hands. We had a once-in-a-lifetime event with this pandemic, and we don't think our predecessor handled it well, and we think we're still suffering from the repercussions. But certainly people have a right to be upset and to be concerned, and we're going to do everything possible, if you keep voting for us, to have a bunch of policies that we think will help to start to alleviate the economic pressures that some people are facing. Thank you, Fanatic Gamer. I really appreciate the follow. That's a palpable message. You're like, oh, okay, right? But when you come out and you're just like, the economy's doing great, look at the numbers, 0% inflation this month, the message that you're sending to a bunch of people that support you but are suffering is like, hey, it must be your fault. Everyone else is doing good, so something's wrong with you. And it doesn't exactly inspire confidence that if you're a Democrat who's struggling economically right now, that they're going to do something to help you out when they're talking about how great things are. Is it because they're so used to the media carrying water from them, like I was saying about left-wingers, that they're just like, we'll say whatever, and they'll just go out and craft the message for us? Maybe. Is it because they're stupid, and they just don't know how dumb that sounds? Maybe. Or is it because they have hubris, and they just don't give a shit? They're like, whatever. We're going to say what we want, and we're still going to call the other side racist and terrorist, and maybe we'll win. I don't know. It's a combination of those, I would say. But that's true. Maybe they're just ignorant. Maybe everyone they know is doing good. And that's why they say it. So when I'm in this debate with Econoboy, like that first debate, he's talking about wage growth. And he's like, actually, wage growth for people in the lowest income bracket have been good. So the inflation's primarily hurting middle class and upper middle class. Well, that's not true. Even if that's true with, like, say, minimum wage increasing somewhat, the problem is inflationary pressures harm the lower class more because the sort of things that we see that inflation affects the price of, such as groceries, gas, a higher percentage of poorer people's income goes to that. For example, if you're a millionaire, you're not going to spend way more on groceries than someone who's a family of four that's making $35,000 a year. You might spend more. Maybe you're buying more lobster and steak. But at the end of the day, you might spend 20, 30% more than them. So if they're spending $15,000 or $10,000 a year on groceries, maybe you're spending $15,000 a year on groceries. But the difference is they're only making $35,000. So that $10,000 they're spending is a huge percentage of their income. Whereas as the millionaire, the groceries only affect you somewhat. Same with gas prices, etc. Right, and Bill puts it better than me. Lower income brackets don't park money in assets that rise along with inflation. They're not in the real estate market. So they're spending money every paycheck on goods, so they get crushed by inflation. Right. And Econoboy was like, yeah, but minimum wage earners over the age of 25, since Biden's been in office, their wages have gone up 6%. Well, inflation's 8.2% now. It was 6-something% when I was talking to him. And he was like, so actually the economy's doing good for poor people. And I was just like, I'll admit that 5 hours into that debate, I could have argued more effectively, but my fundamental point was true, that this is just bullshit and everyone knows it. I know, most people I know fall within that group. People that are making less than $30,000 a year that are over the age of 25. They're not doing good. They were doing better 2 years ago or before Biden was in office than they are now. It's true. And you can massage the numbers any way you want. That's the truth. And I was a prick about it, but one of the things I said to Econoboy is like, so are you just saying that these people are just stupid and full of shit when they think they're doing bad economically? That's right, Bill. That's what he said, though. That's exactly what he was trying to argue to me. And he was, well, this chart says this. And I'm telling you, when it comes to these sorts of numbers, when it comes to economics, you could make the worst economy sound good. It's very reminiscent of Bob Uecker's character. What's his name? Harry Doyle, I think, in the movie Major League. Bob Uecker's a famous baseball announcer. He is absolutely phenomenal in the movie Major League. And one of my favorite parts, because as a Pirates fan growing up, and the Pirates sucked ass every year, it so reminded me of the Pirates announcers, where Bob Uecker would be like, up next to bat Serrano on days that are raining on the third week of the month, with the third time at bat, he's fourth in the league in average. it's like, yeah, you can, when it comes to statistics like that, you can find these like ridiculous minutiae that make it sound like, hey, they're really good. Of course, overall, he's like 60th in the league when it comes to batting average overall. But if it's raining and it's the third Tuesday of the month and it's the fourth inning or later, then he's fourth. It's just, that's how it sounds to me. Like, you know, you could look at this economy right now and listen to the Biden people and people like Econoboy go, actually, it's not that bad. If we look at numbers this way, it's just like, are you kidding me? We did have Barry Bonds pre-steroids. We did have no marbles, right? That was 2, though. That was Major League 2. So, great movie, yeah. Yeah, ball 4, ball 8, ball 12, yeah. Great. By the way, Norm Macdonald has an awesome Bob Uecker story that he tells on, I think, Letterman. It's hilarious. All right, so that was, the last thing to say about it is, so Econoboy is going to make excuses. He was wrong. And Pisco that gets involved in this, it's just semantics. That's all it is. Technically, he didn't say inflation would be completely solved. No, he just said it was a 2022 problem that we would probably see some resolution to it by the end of 2022, that experts were predicting 2% inflation, that he thought it was going to be short-term and transitory and would start to go down and we'd see disinflation. All of those things were incorrect. Pisco wants to argue the semantics of it, that he didn't technically say those very words. That's fine, but that's what you do when you're a hack lawyer and you lose the argument. So I didn't follow I saw that Trust stepped down, but I didn't see why. I've been so busy, but I am going to look into it. It's a good question, Bill. The other thing I wanted to get to tonight was our boy Vaush. For those who don't know Vaush, he's a hack. That's about all there is to say. Where am I at here? So let's go to, there's one other thing I want to do. So the first thing I saw Vaush, unrelated to what I really want to talk about, but I do believe I saw our boy Vaush saying that he got brigaded and he got censored on YouTube. So let's see if I can find that real quick. This is from yesterday. So this is what Vaush put. He says, this morning I woke up to 2 fraudulent YouTube channel strikes, one to my main channel and one to my second. I won't be able to stream or post videos to my main channel for a week. It's extremely clear that these strikes are products of fraudulent brigading, as I'll explain. Now, let me be clear. I dislike Vaush as much as anyone, not as much as anyone. I'd put Vaush in the second highest tier of people that I really don't care for. I think he's a grifter. I think he advocates for violence and things like that. I think he's mealy-mouthed. I think he's bad faith. I don't care for him. I debate someone like Destiny. I think Destiny is not someone that I particularly care for that much. I think his arguments are bad. But I put Destiny in a far higher tier than someone like Vaush. I put Pisco in a higher tier than someone like Vaush. I don't like Vaush. Having said that, do I think he should be banned from YouTube? No. I don't. Let him say his crazy bullshit. I'm glad he's saying it. It allows normal people to see how extreme so many of these people are. So I'm not calling for his censorship. I'm not calling for his brigading. He may very well have been censored for illegitimate reasons. That could be. I'm not, despite anything I'll say here, I'm not calling for him to be canceled. I don't want his channel canceled. We're going to be talking about Ethan from H3H3. I don't want his channel banned. I don't want him suspended for the things he said. And I don't like him. So I just want to get that in the clear. Now, having said this about poor victim Vaush, Vaush wouldn't give a shit and would be perfectly fine with people like me being kicked off YouTube. And you see this with the censorious radical left all the time. They cheer for this shit, and then as soon as it happens to them, they're like, but poor me, it's not fair. The man's putting their boot on me. They'll cheer for the man to put their boot on anyone's neck they disagree with, but predictably when it turns on them, they're like, how could this happen? It's not fair. How could it happen? So I've limited sympathy. But it's always funny. It's funny to see these comeuppance. But believe it or not, that's not even what I just happened to see that. That's not what I really wanted to talk about. What I really wanted to talk about with Vaush has to do with Ethan from H3H3. And then our friend Ellen DeGenerer will be on here as well. So Ethan from H3H3, I know very little about him. I remember watching videos of his like 4 or 5 years ago when a guy whose name was Humongous. And it was this radical feminist lady that was screaming at people and filming it. And he happened to be standing there. And she said, "What's your name?" And he said, "Hugh." And she says, "Hugh what?" And he says, "Humongous." And then she goes on a crusade to get him fired for telling a sexual joke. And H3H3 was sticking up for him. I remember seeing a video like years ago about that. And I was like, it's kind of funny. That was it. Now H3H3's become the inverse of that, where he's now the woke, do everything I can to be Mr. Wokester. I don't watch his show really. He said some really heinous stuff while calling for cancellation and things like that of people he disagrees with. And so there's been a couple times where he said called for acts of violence, which he claimed he was joking about, which resulted in people saying, well, wait a minute, he called for people to be censored. What about him calling for violence? Things of that nature. So in that vein, this occurs. He says that if there's another Holocaust, he hopes that Ben Shapiro is killed in it. I think it's a bad joke. I don't think this is actually him calling for the Holocaust. I don't think it's actually him calling for the death of Ben Shapiro. I don't think he should have been censored for saying this. It's my opinion. Is it bad taste? Sure, whatever. I've told jokes in bad taste. I don't think it's anything, I think Ben Shapiro has every right to respond and be like, you're a hypocrite. And I think people have the right to be like, hey, he's called for the canceling of people. People have been canceled for less that are right-wingers or for dissident left-wingers. So what about this? I don't mind people saying that. It's not my bag. I don't think he should have been censored. Just my opinion. Anyways, let's see what happens. So Ethan tweets out, he says, "A few white supremacists successfully lobbied YouTube to suspend me, a Jewish dual citizen of Israel and the United States, for anti-Semitism. Ben Shapiro and friends can virtue signal all they want, but ultimately they're the ones platforming dangerous anti-Semites. All I did was point it out." Whatever. Vaush says, "That's the nature of the platform. Uncivilly critiquing fascism will get you banned while civilly promoting it won't." Now, I find this ironic because Vaush has said some of the most heinous things imaginable, as I'm about to point out. But he puts himself as this perpetual victim. All I'm doing is criticizing fascism, but I'm not polite about it. The reality is, people like me have been censored over and over on places like YouTube for not saying anything remotely fascist. In fact, from criticizing things like lockdowns, mandates, canceling of people, basically fighting against authoritarianism. But Vaush would call me a fascist. That's what he would call me. And so for him to position himself as this victim, when in reality, he said things that would get any right-winger banned immediately and basically has no repercussions or very limited repercussions. But here he is setting himself up, just like the radical left. They are always the perpetual victims. If 99% of the institutions are on their side, they're still the victims because that 1% isn't. And so I respond to Vaush. I say, didn't you call for people to shoot lawfully open carrying people out of windows and you didn't get suspended for it at all? But please tell us how you're the innocent victim. He did, as we'll get to in a moment. And then this person says, oh yeah, that's totally what he said. No mention of those people belonging to a militia group that's driving through towns and enacting their own version of law by hunting down leftists and LGBT people. Definitely. I said, liar. He said specifically those who were open carrying in Portland marching for Trump should have been shot at people out of windows. Oh, and one of them was shot and killed by an Antifa goon. That happened. And if you remember that case, that in Portland, there were these people that were marching for Trump. They were permitted to march. They were open carrying lawfully. After that rally, one of them was leaving. Two Antifa people approached that guy, shot him in cold blood and killed him. The Antifa guy fled, was then interviewed by Vice, which probably tipped off the cops of where he was staying. The cops showed up. There was a shootout. The Antifa guy was killed. Murdered a Trump supporter in cold blood. I was debating people like Demon Mama on this, who looked at that footage, which I can't even show you because I can't show you an actual murder on the platforms that I'm streaming on, but you could look up the footage for yourself, and people like Demon Mama that support Antifa or have at least downplayed Antifa being a bad group, looked at that and basically said that it was self-defense, that Antifa man had the right to shoot the unarmed man in the way that he did. So this is not occurring in a vacuum. Vaush is saying, I wish they would have shot at those people. They did. and killed one of them. Now, if any right-winger would say something like that, they would immediately be banned from a platform like YouTube. But poor Vaush is the victim. And these people are like, he never said that. And he did, and we'll get to it in a second. Our friend Ellen DeGenerer, if you don't know Ellen DeGenerer, Ellen argued with me on Twitter a few weeks ago and then wanted to come on and talk with me. Ellen admitted his stumbling of his words immediately was because he had just taken Molly the day previously. And when I commented that maybe I shouldn't be debating someone who smoked Molly, he let me know that he did not smoke it, that he had placed it up his ass. He did not purport himself very well in that debate. It ended when he was asking me difficult questions about abortion, such as if someone is raped, should they be allowed to get an abortion? And I didn't get through my nuanced answer. My answer in part was going to be, thank you so much, Preacher. I really appreciate it. Thank you. 12 viewers. Welcome, Preacher's viewers. You come in a morbid topic. We're talking about someone I was arguing with on Twitter that called into my show. But my argument was basically this. If you truly believe that it's a life, that it's a baby, we wouldn't say, well, if a 1-year-old baby's there, but it was, because the mother was raped, that you have the right to terminate that baby. Now, my personal belief is that we should have a limit, an early limit on abortions, 15 weeks, probably before that, heartbeat, something like that. I'm open to suggestions on what that would be, but I probably think there should be allowed to be some early-term abortion. Regardless, you might think that's a terrible position. I think that late-term abortions are incredibly heinous. It should only be reserved for very specific scenarios, such as the woman's life is in danger and things of that nature. In the case of rape, if a woman was able to prove that she was raped and was unable because of the nature of her rapist to get access to a medical facility to have an abortion, I think that exceptions should be made in those particular circumstances to justify that. But in general, I think, sadly, even in the tragic cases of rape, that there has to be a cutoff. We can't say, well, you were raped, so you could have a 9-month abortion. I'm sorry. I don't believe that. I didn't get most of that out, and Ellen DeGenerer started accusing me of raping my wife in order to have a child, at which point I said, see you later, and they continued to call me a rapist. So that's how it went. But that's who Ellen DeGenerer is. Did not do very well in the discussion that they had with me. But chiming in here, and if you are tuning in late to the show, Ellen called my Discord, which showed up on my phone, and continually came into my YouTube chat and tried chatting with me on there, alluding to me being a rapist and things of that nature. So I just refuse to give anyone the time of day and allowing them on my channel that is going to talk to me like that. Econoboy, on the other hand, could call in, and I would absolutely talk to him. Same with Pisco, but not this jack-off. So anyways, he says, if it was said, then it would be really easy for him to bring up a clip of him saying that, meaning Vaush. But you can't because you're a liar. I would resort to lying too if I had positions as bad as yours. And this guy says, I'm watching this video, but I don't see it. And this guy's just sort of asking questions. I said, that's the wrong video. This video is from 2 years ago. It's from the one about genocide against LGBT. And this, Ellen says, the genocide I actively support. I do not actively support genocide. He says, can I link the video? Ellen says, it would be cool if he could also timestamp the place where it was said. He won't, though, because he's a liar and he doesn't care about anything. I said, okay. Now, I'm going to play the video for you. But you can see after I play the video, do you think Ellen says, oh, okay, thanks? You think that's what he's going to say? Nope, he says, Rob, you're just relying on people not verifying what you say or do. Just like a sick little, you get a sick little kick out of lying. I said, Vaush's quote's there. You have no response. He says, can you type the exact quote? Blah, blah, blah. I said, LOL. He says, you want me to come on and spank you this time? I'm not on Molly, so you'll have no chance. I say, LOL. He says, yes, people should be able to defend their neighborhoods from white nationalist militias. Why do you hate the Second Amendment? Rape baby Rob out here being the world's most coherent libertarian. And so he went from Vaush clearly didn't say that to, of course he said it. It's a good thing. That's just so you know, that's what it's like to talk. And this happens to me all of the time. People say that was never said. That was never done. And then when I take the time to prove it, they say, well, of course it was done. It was necessary. When I said, for example, that using unverified opposition research sourced by a Russian in order to spy on a president of the United States is a huge scandal. I was told, of course, that wasn't done. When it was definitively proven that it was done, they said, well, of course it happened, and it was a good thing. That's how they always do it. Now, let's see the clip. Now, I'm going to play more than just this clip, but I'll play the end, right, just so you know. Now, again, let's go back and see what my initial claim was. My initial claim was called for people to shoot lawfully open carrying people out of windows. That's what I said. And they were like, no, he didn't say that. So let's see. Where exactly is the clip? The clip is 3105. This is from my Rumble channel. I will put the link out. You guys can check out my Rumble channel too. So an oldie but a goodie, a whole video, an hour or so I went on Vaush about sort of his insanity. So you can see for yourself what he said. Maybe if it loads. Oh boy, is it going to make me a monkey out of me, not load? There we go. Hyperbolic here? No, he's saying absolutely. And even those on the left that don't recognize, you're not in my group if you don't recognize we're in the precipice of this genocide. But this, to me, is the coup de grace. All of this, you could say, okay. But he's not really prescribing a solution. He's just saying, get prepared. I want you to imagine that a right-winger would say this on a platform such as Twitch or YouTube, and consider what would happen to them. Ready?
But like others will say, like, no, don't do that. There might be attempts at ousting. Remember during the Black Lives Matter rallies, there were like those Patriot Prayer dumb fucks rolling their $60,000 trucks through like urban neighborhoods with a bunch of guys with guns in the pickup trucks. When that happens, I want people to be able to take shots at them from apartment windows.
Take shit. They weren't. There's okay. If you want to drive around with guns, you have.
Let me replay that for you. These were people, they weren't committing crimes. They were permitted to protest. They were driving around, right? Vaush is going to talk quite specifically on what he would like done. Here we are. That a right-winger would say this on a platform such as Twitch or YouTube, and consider what would happen to them. Ready?
But like others will say, like, no, don't do that. There might be attempts at ousting. Remember during the Black Lives Matter rallies, there were like those Patriot Prayer dumb fucks rolling their, $60,000 trucks through like urban neighborhoods with a bunch of guys with guns in the pickup trucks. When that happens, I want people to be able to take shots at them from apartment windows.
Take shit. They.
Get it? Is that clear enough? That's right. He wants to shoot lawful, peaceful protesters. That's what he just said. That's what he just advocated for. Now, you'll notice that the video I was looking was actually Destiny reacting to it because I couldn't even find Vaush's stream of that. I don't know if he took it down or what. But he did it. You saw him broadcast that. That's what he said. We can show more of that if people want. He's talking this whole video, the exchange he's having with this person, about the need to arm and proactively go on offense with violence because a genocide is occurring against LGBT people from right-wingers. That's what he's saying. And he's saying things like, shouldn't we have stopped the Nazis before they came into power? And then later in the discussion, when it's basically hitting home, that's like, dude, you're going to get banned. You're literally calling for mass violence against people that disagree with you politically. You're saying that we need to take them out like they're Nazis. He says, I'm not actually calling for violence. Really? What did he just say there? Now, I remind you, right? Everyone was saying, oh, Vaush didn't say that. You're wrong. And then, when I proved that he said it, at least our good friend Ellen DeGenerer said, of course they were white supremacists. They have the right to defend themselves. You see? But Vaush is the victim. If you're just uncivilly calling out fascism, you get attacked by YouTube, he says. Is that what that sounded like? Uncivilly attacking fascism. That sounded like someone openly calling for murder of people that he disagreed with politically and not being punished for it. That's what it sounded like to me. After doing a whole stream talking about how genocide is occurring against the LGBT and we need to take up arms and go on the offense proactively to stop it. No suspension. And yet here he is today talking to poor Ethan from H3H3. Oh, woe is us left-wingers that call for violence and the shooting of people we disagree with. How dare we sometimes get a finger wagged at us? You could say that shit on Twitch, but don't you dare talk about biological males competing in athletic competitions. Don't say that. You could say that shit on YouTube, but don't you dare talk about, questions about the election or where COVID came from. Can't do that. But oh boy, you could talk about, I wish we'd shoot those Republicans that were lawfully openly carrying. I wish they'd do that. Context, please. Can you give me the context of why he said that? Context. By the way, he'll get on Tim Pool. Vaush will be on Tim Pool. He's been there, not me. My points are considered radical and extreme. What are those radical extreme positions? Can someone show me one instance ever of the entire time I've been streaming of calling for violence? In fact, quite the opposite. I've spoke actively out against violence on all sides every chance given. Have I showed myself to be extremist and said that certain people shouldn't have the right to exist? No, I haven't. Yeah, 24-hour stream is going to be the Saturday before the election. So it'll be November, as long as my wife's okay with it, I guess. She's really in charge, so. But that will be November 5th. Oh, remember, the 5th of November. Bill thinks being a Pirates fan is extremism. I don't get into a lot of the Jew talk. I think it's overblown and it's easy to get into racism. However, I've been pretty consistent on this as well. Was it Rashida Tlaib when she said it's all about the Benjamins and there was this huge virtue signaling about how anti-Semitic that was? I didn't necessarily think so. I thought she was saying the AIPAC, the Jewish lobbying, the Israeli lobbying group, had too much financial influence. I don't have a problem with her saying, I don't like Rashida Tlaib. Rashida Tlaib may very well be an anti-Semite, but I didn't find that statement to be proof that she was. I didn't think that it was something that she had to apologize for, which they didn't really. The irony is, of course, when that statement occurred, this is what happened. The Democrats were like, yeah, we'll release a statement condemning it. And then the statement they released were like, we condemn white people attacking black people, and we condemn white people attacking Jewish people, and we condemn people attacking gay people. They basically condemned every type of hatred except what their person just said. So even in that, it was like, yeah, we'll release a statement condemning all hatred, as long as it's from the groups they found. I don't care if it's a trope or not. I don't give a shit. I don't think it's evidence of bigotry. Yeah, right, Zeogoat. If I'm considered radical, how far to the left are people? But I get censored all the time. I get community strikes constantly on YouTube. Constantly. For, twice I've got it for talking about the Time Magazine article, talking about a shadowy cabal fortifying the election for Joe Biden. Can't talk about that. Not allowed. I've got it for talking about why the virus potentially came from a Wuhan lab. Can't talk about that. But you could say that you want to shoot people. You want a society where you shoot people that you politically disagree with. That you could say. You could say that. You could talk about how there's a genocide occurring against your side, and it's time to take up arms and fight back. And shouldn't we have killed the Nazis before they came into power? Shouldn't we have killed Hitler? I'm not saying kill them. I'm just saying shoot them. Vaush is constantly trending on Twitter, by the way. I don't know if he's got some kind of deal, some kind of promotion with the people on Twitter that he's constantly trending. But you see these radical people like him constantly being given every benefit from these social media platforms and other groups. And still they whine. It's not fair. Oh my God, one of my videos got removed. This is outrageous. I'm sick and tired of it. I'm sick and tired of the Keffels crowd, right? Let's sit around like little kings and queens and just, we demand this person be deplatformed and this person be deplatformed and you need to be deplatformed. And people have to walk on eggshells. It's all bullshit. They're some of the most hateful, garbage people that have ever existed. They have all of this on their side, the ability to get people canceled that they don't want, the ability to get away with hateful shit. And still, when the smallest modicum of authority is brought down on them, they cry like babies. So I just thought that was funny today. Old Vaush, old victim Vaush. Poor guy. It's all right, Vaush. You'll be all right. Keep running from me in debates. He was asked the other day on the Crucible, will you debate robnoerr one-on-one? And he said something effective. robnoerr, didn't I debate? Oh, isn't he well, yeah, I'll think about it. Right. He knows. Meme your way through it again, Vaush. By the way, Destiny doesn't want to debate me either. None of the big lefties do. That's okay. I don't blame them. I don't have a big following, and they don't like getting wrecked. They might be more willing to get wrecked by me if I had a big following and they thought that they could get viewers or something. But as it is. Yeah, I don't know, Zio. The situation's crazy. I didn't spend a lot of time on the drama. I think it's funny, too. The left wing spending a lot of time talking about the Twitch drama. But trust me, if the Republicans end up winning the midterms, then once, we start to see economic woes and problems around with the border and stuff, all of a sudden they'll be willing to talk about it because it'll be those dastardly Republicans' fault. Don't want to talk about it when the Democrats are running everything. Got to find some internet drama to talk about. What's on my hat? This is a farm and market, Zach Roll's Farm and Market in my community. Took my kid to a pumpkin patch there the other day, so. Sparky. I don't go that blue, But there you go. There were 3 characters. Now, my friend Bill asked me about what do I think about Liz Truss stepping down already as prime minister. I didn't look into it, but this is what I find interesting. It's interesting that conservatives win in the UK, and yet what they are given through Liz Truss and Boris Johnson are just more fucking liberal policies. Like, if you don't want to take the whole spying on Donald Trump and the obvious collusion of the intel agencies and the Democrats and the media and social media to show just how fucked up our democracy is, if you don't prefer that example, why don't you take the example of Brexit? How about that? Yeah, we'll give the plebes a voice. Go ahead, let them have their stupid vote. Meanwhile, we'll inundate all state media with how stupid and racist you are and how the whole country will collapse if you vote for it. So we'll be sure to win. Just like they thought about Hillary Clinton. Hillary's sure to beat Trump. Great. Leave him win the primary. Fine. That's how they felt about Brexit. Whoops. And so then it was like, oh, we need a redo. They did the same shit with the Libson Treaty in Ireland. Vote didn't go the way that the EU wanted. Oh, well, revote. Brexit didn't go the way they wanted. Oh, well, we'll just put it off for years and years and years and years. Prime minister after prime minister will find another excuse. Don't like the lefty prime ministers, righties win. Whatever, we'll just have them act as lefties. What good's electing conservatives if they're just going to govern like they're a Labor Party? So I don't know specifically what Liz Truss did. I don't know why I think I read that it was because of disastrous economic policies is why she's stepping down. But it's just an illusion of choice. And it's similar in the United States. Do I want Republicans to win in the midterms? Yeah. Am I going to do my best to try to get people like Dr. Oz elected here in Pennsylvania? Sure. Is it really going to make a difference? Probably not. It'll be a big celebration moment. Yay. Nothing's won. If these people don't make changes to the corrupt system, what does it matter? Yeah, that's a good point, Jim Bob. She was only there for 6 weeks. What is the official reason that they gave for her stepping down? I don't even know. I was just reading it had to do with economic policies. I have no clue. I didn't follow it today. But it's blackpilling in a sense when you see how corrupt things are. But again, I go back, it sounds stupid. I love this show Meat Eater. It's this guy Steve Ranella. It's like a hunting show. I really like it. I know when you say hunting show, you think of like the Outdoor Network and the traditional, just like three guys go out and shoot a big buck and that's it. That's not what this show's like. And sometimes he shows you how to prepare food. I think he's a very intelligent guy. He's been on Rogan's show a lot. His name's Steve Ranella. Really interesting guy. I love his show, Meat Eater. And there's this episode, he had this quote that really stuck with me. And he's talking about, he's stalking this one particular animal. I think it's a deer. And he's saying how when he hunts, he prefers the style of hunting where you're stalking as opposed to just sitting in a tree stand or something. And he says, he's narrating this and he's like, I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to get this deer that I saw. Like he sees this deer and so he's going after it. And so he's like, in my head, I know I'm not. He's like, but I always live by this mantra, pessimism in my head, but optimism with my feet. Right. And what he's saying there is his head's telling him this ain't going to work out. Things are going to fail. But his feet or his actions are like, we're going to keep moving forward. We're going to keep acting like it's going to work out. I'm going to do everything possible to make this work. But in my head, I'm like, it's probably not going to work. That's how I feel about myself when it comes to politics. It's like, okay. Deep down, I'm like, I don't have faith in anyone. Even, you know who I'm the highest on right now? It's probably Carrie Lake. I think Carrie Lake's phenomenal. But deep down, I know if Carrie Lake was made president in 2024 and Republicans won the House and the Senate, that most shit probably wouldn't change all significantly. But I'll still keep walking like it is. I'll still keep moving with my feet like it is. And the other thing is, I'm the type of person that likes to have my back against the wall. I think that's, even when I debated, I like that. I like when I went into, I was the opposite of my partner. Like I didn't know a lot of these national teams. So once we got to like these national level tournaments, I would want my coach to be brutally honest. Be like, is this team better than us? And he was good at it. He'd be like, yeah, they're better than you. Okay, now you know what you got to do. You got nothing to lose. You could take chances, It's kind of freeing. That's how I feel, And I also know something that I hope you all know, which is it's not that politics isn't important. It is. But your family's more important. Your friends are more important. Your personal health, whether it be your religion, whether it be your family relationships, your physical health, all of those things are more important. Hell, even in governance, your local governance, your school board and stuff is probably more important. So I could come on here and it's cathartic to me to talk about a lot of things that I think are really damaging and depressing and say, same old with these two groups of politicians. But I'm a really happy guy. My son Hank just got his cast taken off, for God's sake. So, it seems counterintuitive. It seems like a contradiction, but to me, it's not. So that's how I feel, Oh, I see, Modettes. You're making racist jokes. Yeah, don't do that again or you're banned. I don't mind humor, but I'm trying not to get my channel banned, and it's just stupid. Most of the people that come on and do that are intentionally trying to get me banned, so only warning. What's up, Just Scuzzy? How's it going? So yeah, that's how I feel. But at the end of the day, it's depressing. Like you see these you look at like that 2014 to 2016, like the populism that was rising, even on the left. There was populism in the form of Bernie Sanders. I don't agree with Bernie Sanders, but the idea that so many people were upset about what they saw as corruption in a two-tiered system on the left and the right, you saw the election of Trump, you saw Brexit, and the system's just like, nah, sorry, we're not going to leave that have any effect. So battle's never won, or the war's never won, I guess. Anything else people wanted to talk about before I go? It is surprising. Like, I've been watching videos of like San Francisco and stuff, and Wawa, which is sort of a famous gas station chain around here in Pennsylvania and other places. They've left Philadelphia. Companies are leaving San Francisco. I mean, it's crazy. I am predicting, maybe I'm wrong, I hope I'm wrong, I think that you could see that the move is being made, that many Democrats and many establishment people know the writing's on the wall, and that the Republicans are probably going to win at least the House and probably the Senate. And so they're already changing the narrative to, oh, well, when things get worse, it's their fault. I think that we've been propped up in an attempt. I mean, we know this in some ways. We know Chris Hayes said this, Biden's releasing the strategic oil reserve because we have to basically bribe people to vote Democrat because it's so important. We can't have those dastardly Republicans win. So we have to do everything possible, even if it's bad for the long term of the country, just to make it through to the midterm. We had Biden's quid pro quo with Saudi Arabia trying to get them to wait 1 month until after the election. Why do you think he did that? You think it's because, if we just wait 1 month, it'll be better for the country? Or do you think it's because we just need people to not see the real impact of our policies on energy until after the election? Do I think he's an anti-Semite? I don't know. I didn't follow a lot of what he said. I thought his conversation with Tucker was sort of interesting. I think he's a more interesting person that people give thought to, but I also don't put too much faith in celebrities just because they're saying some things that I happen to agree with. And I think that so many Republicans or not just Republicans, but conservatives or populists are so desperate for sort of figures of institutional power to agree with them that they're willing to overlook a bunch of stuff. And I don't mean the anti-Semitism stuff, right? I mean, there's a lot of like sort of rhetoric about racism in the country and stuff like that. Some of it I get, some of it seems over the line to me. But I don't know. I try not, every time Bill Maher says something that's like, oh, wow, Bill Maher was against lockdowns. Yay. It's like, no, fuck all that. Like, it's okay to point that out and say even a lefty sees this, but it's a grift. If he's a black Hebrew Israelite, yeah. I'm less concerned about that. You know what I'm still concerned about? How about this? I'm concerned about the fact that Louis Farrakhan was hanging out with the Congressional Black Caucus until they basically made it public and they had to be like, oh shit, sorry about that. Hanging out with Barack Obama. You want to talk about anti-Semites? Ain't even a question with him. But there he was, palling around. How do you think it'd be if a bunch of conservatives from the South, in 2008, 2009 were palling around with David Duke or Richard Spencer in the halls of Congress or at Richard Spencer's church? Think that would have went well? But the Democrats did. How about this? When George Floyd died in one of the many funerals that they broadcast, the one in Dallas, I believe, the preacher announced, thank you to the Nation of Islam. Or, I'm sorry, I believe it was the Black Hebrew Israelites for providing security. Maybe it was the Nation of Islam. Oh, what's that? An anti-Semitic, racist, homophobic group? There it is, broadcast on national television. Thank you so much. Brought to you by CNN. So I don't give a shit what some rapper says. I honestly didn't follow it. My feeling is that he believes, like, there is a lot that, listen, I'm just talking in broad swaths here. There is a lot of animosity in inner city black communities to other groups. There are a lot of communities that feel that Asian people run all the businesses in their little towns, all the gas stations and bodegas and liquor stores. So there's animosity there. That's why you saw this rise in Asian hate crimes. Sadly, they went out of the news because many cities, that rise in Asian hate crimes is coming from black Americans. Yaqub, yeah, that's right. That's from Nation of Islam, yeah. Old Yaqub. Remember when that guy shot those people in the subway and they had the Yaqub poster in his room? Didn't hear much about black supremacy, did you? Or black anti-Semitism. For those that don't know, Yaqub is this Nation of Islam belief that there was this scientist back like 2,000 years ago who was black, who had this giant big head, right? And this guy created white people as basically demonic people to be evil and go out there and conquer black people. Yep, that's what the Nation of Islam, people that pile around with the Black Congressional Caucus, that's what they believe. So when you had a guy that believes that shit out there shooting a bunch of people, it was weird. Didn't hear much about it, did you? Yeah, Elijah Muhammad. Yeah. So maybe, and I think that there probably is a vein of successful black people in the entertainment business that blame raw deals they feel they've got from their agents or their producers or people at, the record companies that they work at. And a lot of those people happen to be Jewish. I don't think that just because there's some conspiracy that Jewish people are, I don't think that's what that's about at all. But there might be people in the community, black community, or the rap community, or the entertainment community that feel that way. Does that make them anti-Semitic? I don't know. Do they hate all Jewish people? Do they blame all Jewish people? Or are they just saying it just so happens to be these people in positions of power are Jewish and I don't like them? If it's the latter, does that make it okay? I don't know. Probably not. But I don't really give a shit with all the problems that are going on. I don't think Kanye should be banned. I think the idea that they're threatening to sue him for hundreds of millions of dollars is asinine for talking about George Floyd's death. It's stupid. And as long as we have a two-tiered justice system where left-wingers with almost impunity can engage in violence and slander and shit like that, and right-wingers are locked up even for nonviolent crimes, or people like Alex Jones are sued for billions of dollars just for having opinions, we're going to see this shit go. It's going to be the full court press on free speech is coming. That's the only issue about Kanye that I'm concerned with. That he's being silenced, that banking institutions are talking about kicking him off. It always goes one way. You could, with impunity, get up and say white people are evil, blah, blah, blah. No problem. No problem at all. You get hired by the New York Times like that one lady, Sarah Jung, did. I heard he was thinking of buying Parler. I don't know if he did or not. But that's all I'm saying. I want equal application. All you need to know is our banking system didn't kick Jeffrey Epstein off. Bill says, when Louis Farrakhan, who's the leader of the Nation of Islam, who I remind you has been in many photos and meetings with the Congressional Black Caucus and Barack Obama, Louis Farrakhan commented that, quote, when the white man was made, his father was a liar. His father was a murderer. So they are born with lie and murder in their nature. Remember, Nick Cannon, who's like still on network TV hosting shows, former star of Nickelodeon. He went on that raid about how white people are heathenistic animals, blah, blah, blah. He ain't canceled. No problem. Banks didn't cancel him. Network television didn't cancel him. That's all you need to know. There's no problem with bigotry or anti-Semitism as long as you toe the right line. I mean, I hate to say this, but I know this is sort of repeating Mike Cernovich, and I have to admit that this is where it comes from. If you really wanted to look at heinous actions and things that people have said and things like that, it's hard to go beyond Howard Stern. Some of the things Howard Stern used to have clocks, countdowns to how soon until this girl turns 18 as they sexualized her. He wore blackface. He said all kinds of heinous shit, objectified women. Now, I'm not saying that I want Howard Stern canceled, but all the woke people that complain, I think the song, Baby It's Cold Outside's misogynistic. I think that, this person wearing blackface, that was beyond the pale. Howard Stern didn't wear blackface like he just happened to paint himself dark and was going as the Black Panther. Like, he legitimately wore, like, the Al Jolson blackface. Sexualized children. That's great, Ansley. You have the right to feel guilty forever you want. Good luck to you. That's right. That's the lesson, Max. That's always been the lesson. If you're on the powerful side, you could get away with everything's forgivable. And if you're not, any little slip up is punishable. There we go, Bill. Donating to Anlessy. Thank you, Bill. He feels terribly guilty about his being white, so. if Louis Farrakhan, or I'm sorry, Louis Farrakhan, if Kanye West was still in George Bush hates black people mode, right? If he would have spent 4 years talking about how shitty Donald Trump was, he could be out there talking about, and I don't like the Jewish people that were my agents or whatever the fuck he's saying. I don't know. And hardly anyone, they'd be like, oh, that Kanye. That'd be that. 69 total subs. All right. Gifted sub is reparations, yeah. I think Anlessy's sort of a troll is what I think, but I don't know. So, you know, to me, the only issue with the Kanye thing is it's just another example of let's attack free speech, right? And I'm not saying I don't know the specifics of what he's been saying. I really don't. I've seen like 1 or 2 clips where it appears that he's just like, the Jews are out to get me, basically. I don't know. But it's like, whatever. I don't give a shit. I don't. If it's racist and I see it, and I'd be like, that's fucking racist. I hate that. Okay? I still wouldn't want banks to cancel him. I still wouldn't want him to be canceled off social media, not have a voice. I don't want the people that hate white people to be canceled. I want the people that say I hate Trump supporters. I'd rather live next to an MS-13 person. I don't want them canceled. Fuck, I just played you a clip of Vaush saying that he wants a world where we shoot at people that are Trump supporters that are lawfully open and caring, that we should shoot at them. I don't want him canceled. That's worse than anything Kanye said that I'm aware of. I don't want Nick Cannon canceled. But the sad truth is, until people on the radical left face the same repercussions as everyone that they want to instill on everyone else, it's not going to end. That's one of the things I thought was amazing about the Alex Jones verdict, was watching people that basically do what I do, except it's their profession, left-wing talking heads on Twitch and YouTube going, yeah, he deserved it. It's like, hey, dumb fuck. You realize your entire career is saying controversial shit online. So I hope you never say anything that someone says, I'm offended by that. I think I'll sue for $1 billion. Good luck. One of my favorite rap songs of all time is the song Barry Bonds by Kanye. Yeah, I've removed the specific tweet. Again, it's all subjective. What it shows is just the blatant double standard. And that I'm against the censorship anyways, but more I'm against the double standard. If you're going to say people can't say anything that's remotely racist, okay. Like Khomeini had a Twitter feed. Antifa has Twitter feeds. Right, yeah. J.K. Rowling cheering Alex Jones. Okay, we'll see what happens. Well, the ADLs defended Nazi rallies, but not Trump supporters. That's too far for them. But yeah, you're right. Heinous speech, that is the principle of free speech, that you should even be allowed to engage in heinous speech. That's what's so offensive. Now, I'll admit I didn't follow the Alex Jones trials very much. It was a kangaroo court from all appearances. But my understanding is the damage he is paying is for smearing these parents as not really being parents who had children die, that they were actors. I'm sorry, that shouldn't be a civil lawsuit. Sorry. It's his opinion. Sorry. If I was one of those parents, would I be furious and say, I'm going to take this fucker for all I can? Sure, probably. But if that's $1 billion, where do we stop? Again, that's emotional harm. You could say some nut job could have done something to them, so that's the potential for physical harm. How about this? I can show you a clip right now of Rachel Maddow saying, if you take the vaccine, you can't get the virus. So let's say then, I'm someone who is very afraid of the virus, right? I have COPD, and I went out and I'm like, okay, once I take the vaccine, I heard Rachel Maddow say that then I can't contract the vaccine. And then I take the virus, and then I contracted the vaccine, and I collapsed a lung, and I had physical pain and rehabilitation, or God forbid, you know, my uncle died based on this advice from Rachel Maddow. Can I sue her for $1 billion? Can I sue MSNBC? That's real physical harm that was caused. Or is that just her opinion? Yeah, Robert Barnes is excellent, pleeps. That's where I saw a lot of this. Where do we draw the line? If someone says, I think 9/11 was fake, do victims of 9/11 victims' family get to sue them? What's the implication here? It could go on both sides, right? If someone says, I think the surviving members of the Branch Davidians at Waco's are nutbag cultists that got what they had coming to them, can they sue for emotional damage? Yeah, Zelensky get to sue you? Probably. It'll only be applied on one side, though. If you're Carter Page and you were smeared as a Russian asset by both the FBI and the media over and over, do you get to sue for billions of dollars? If someone says all cops are bastards and then someone goes out and shoots a cop, does their family get to sue that celebrity that said ACAB for billions of dollars? Just curious. Just trying to figure out what the rules are now. And so you would think if you're someone whose career is commentating, that purely for survival reasons, you would be like, whoa, I don't know about all of this. But no, they cheered on because they don't even have a remote fear that it would ever be applied to them. That's how confident, I thought one of the most telling things after the raid, I mentioned this on my channel, after the raid of Mar-a-Lago, to me, one of the most telling things was Hillary Clinton put a tweet out where she was selling shirts and mugs that said, but her emails. Now, here's a guy who gets raided for the crime of allegedly improperly handling classified material at his home, a crime that we know Hillary Clinton also committed, but she was let off the hook for. In any sane world, she would look, oh shit, they're going to prosecute Trump for this. I guess I was lucky that they let me off the hook. But no, she's out there celebrating because she doesn't even have a remote fear that the justice system would ever even remotely apply itself equally to him and her. She knows it. She has no fear. Peter Strzok wouldn't be on television right now telling you how shitty Trump was if he had any fear whatsoever that our justice system would prosecute him for his crimes. They have no fear. Bill, I've gone back and forth. He is definitely a troll. The fact checkers, right? Which fact checkers? Okay, me and Bill are the fact checkers. Now what? See, Bill's on it. Trust the science. Well, just the scientists that agree with me. Trust the fact checkers, but just the fact checkers that I appoint. That's it. It's really that simple. And then when you bring up these sorts of things, the best that the left could muster is like the insults that they make at me is like, oh, well, but her emails, that's what Rob's that's all Rob talks about. What about Black Lives Matter? What about our emails? No, all of these things that I talk about are based on the topics that the left is advocating for today. For example, the raiding of Mar-a-Lago or January 6th being violence. And it's saying, the worst thing would be to have a system of two-tier justice that encourages or facilitates inappropriate behavior on one hand and then overtly punishes and dissuades that same behavior on the other side. Now, I can have opinions on what I think should happen to both groups. I'll give you an example. I personally do not think that it is a big deal that should be a crime that we really aggressively go after for candidates to seek dirt on their opponents from foreign nationals. Many people disagree with me. But if Hillary Clinton wants to talk to Russians that say Trump got pissed on by Russian hookers, I don't have a problem with that. The problem is the FBI taking that information not verifying it, paying the people involved, knowing it came from Hillary Clinton, and using it to spy on Trump. That's the serious issue. Now, if Hillary and company knowingly lied, also an issue. Knowingly lying to the FBI. But just in general, candidates getting dirt from shady sources on their opponents, I don't care. Might be unethical. I don't think it rises to the level of a crime that I'd like to see prosecuted. Trump Jr. met with a lawyer, Russian lawyer. I don't have a problem with that. If he promised, oh, if you give us the goods, then when we're president, we'll give you favors. That I have a problem with. But not just listening and getting dirt. But maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you say, I disagree, Rob. I think that Don Jr. committed a crime. I think it should be a crime to talk to foreigners and trying to get dirt in your opponents. And I also think that Hillary's team committed that crime as well. For talking to Christopher Steele and paying them, and for talking to Igor Dushenko. Okay, I disagree with you, but that's a defensible position. At least you're being even-handed. You're saying that the law needs to be fairly applied on both sides. But that's not what... That's of less concern to me. That person's of less concern to me than the person that's like, I think Don Jr. should be in jail, and I think it was perfectly fine for Hillary and them to talk to Igor Dushenko. That's the problem. And they know they can't defend this. None of them can. That's why they just say, it's whataboutism. When Trump was in office, if you said, like, okay, you're complaining about Trump doing this, like kids in cages, but Obama did it too, they're like, well, that's whataboutism. We don't care. Obama's not in office. Okay, well, now Trump's not in office. Now what? All they do is say, Trump, 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 Trump. Quid pro quo Trump. We should have impeached. Okay, we have quid pro quo Biden now. Impeach? Wow, that's just whataboutism. They have no defense. They're on talking about fucking Twitch drama. January 6th committee. Remember when I wanted to talk about I'm Really Important about when a leftist that was inspired by Democrats attempted to assassinate Brett Kavanaugh? And I'm Really Important told me on Twitter for everyone to see, we only talk about big boy topics on my channel. Attempted assassination attempt inspired by Democrats of a Supreme Court justice doesn't qualify as big boy topic. You know what he talked about in his show that day? January 6th committee. That's the big boy topic. Now, if it was reversed and if Republicans take over, say in 2024, and they're having a hearing on FBI corruption, but then someone attempts to assassinate, say, I don't know, who's one of the lefties that are still left on the court? Sheila Jackson, right? You think I'm Really Important is going to say, that's not a big boy story, a right-winger trying to assassinate a left-wing justice. That's stupid. Let's go back to the trial, right, to the committee, the Republican-led committee on corruption. You think that's what he's going to say? Oh, I'll bet it'll be a big boy topic then. I'll bet the media will go fucking apeshit. Oh, assassination attempt. The right's out of control. We need to censor people online. They're dangerous. Stochastic terrorism. But when it happens, when Steve Scalise gets shot, or where Kavanaugh attempts to get assassinated, or when Rand Paul gets beat, it's all, well, you know, what can you do? What can you do? Violence is bad. Whatever. Moving on. But that's what they default to. Touring News. I'm going to end the stream soon, but I'd be happy to talk to you about the global sovereign debt crisis at some point, Touring News. But I got to be done by at least midnight and hopefully before then. But yeah, you can call in someday. I'm really infinite, maybe. I mean, he admitted to me. He said, I like to stay in my bubble. I don't blame him. And part of it, I'm not even facetious about this. Not everyone does well in a situation with a back and forth. Not everyone's a debater. You shouldn't be forced to do something you don't want. If I'm Really Important, doesn't want to talk to me, that's perfectly fine. It's okay. But that's what it is. He knows he doesn't have the ability to defend these positions. Same with Destiny. No, I agree. I'm friends with left-wing people. Yeah, thanks, Touring News. Have a good one, man. I usually stream weeknights between 9 and 11. If you catch me at Eastern time, if you catch me on like a Monday and Tuesday, normally I'm not at home. So when I stream, I don't have a camera. But as long as you don't mind an audio-only stream, it's fine by me. What's going on here? 1 second. Someone, yeah, thank you, Polite Pan, for the message on Twitter. I'll check out that video regarding Econoboy. Yeah, he's always been, I agree with you, he's always been team transitory, that inflation's transitory. It's a very funny thing, not to slide off topic here, but isn't that funny, the people that said that? Right? We make fun of them. The Biden administration, the Paul Krugmans, the Econoboys. Inflation's transitory. That's what they said. Define that. What does that mean? No one ever really was like, well, what do you mean by that? No, we know what they were implying. It's short term. It's just a transition to a better economy. It'll be very quick and painless. That's what they meant. But what they'll claim is, oh no, technically it's transitory. Technically a 10-year recession's transitory. We're transitioning, right? From a healthy economy to a shitty economy back to a healthy economy. That's transitory. I suppose. You could argue that. That's what they try to get away. What did they mean when they said that? Inflation's transitory and transitory. Well, we're 2 years on. They're making excuses for their claims. But that's definitely what they claimed. Right, and the way that whataboutism is used, the reason that it's sort of an effective tool for them is because they currently have the opinion that is dominated by the establishment and these institutions that set the narrative. So like it or not, we're still, myself as well, is still in this trap. When almost all the media is talking about one thing, and almost all the entertainment industry, and almost all the popular people on social media, and almost all the popular people that are streamers, and almost all of academia, when they're all talking about this thing, even the people that disagree with their take on it tend to talk about that thing. And so by being on the side that crafts the narrative, they never have to defend, okay, kids in cages are bad. Well, now there's there's 4 times more kids in cages under Biden. They don't have to defend that. They talked about it ad nauseum. When Trump was there, it was human rights abuse. But now they don't have to defend it. And when you bring it up, they're like, whataboutism? That's whataboutism. And that's what sort of one of the biggest sort of biases that we have is the bias of omission, of the things that you don't talk about, of the things the mainstream media is not talking about. Like the Hunter Biden laptop story. Well, this story, the impact of it's not Hunter Biden smokes crack, Hunter Biden sleeps with hookers, whatever, I don't give a shit. It's he was trading on his father's name for influence to our adversaries, getting huge sums of money, much of which may have been being kicked back to his father, or his father knew that he was trading favors for this. In Ukraine, in China. That's the story. That's what the laptop story is. We actually had a business partner of Hunter Biden and Jim Biden say that it was, in fact, Joe Biden that was getting the 10%, and they engaged in fraud, and they engaged in all these shady deals with our enemies, like Burisma, that was supposedly a Russian oligarch owned it, or Communist government of China. That's the story. They just didn't cover it, and they censored you. And what they do is they ignore it. They say it's crazy conspiracy theory bullshit. And then later, when it no longer can affect them, they're like, oh, okay, I guess it was right. Okay. Too late now. And they do this all the time. Or a story they talk about as being massively important, once we find out that it actually is backfiring in their face, all of a sudden it's not important. Russia collusion was the biggest story in the world for years and years and years. Now we find out there was, in fact, Russia collusion. There was a Russian national named Igor Dushenko who was paid for who was talking to the Hillary Clinton camp, who then talked to a British spy that was paid for by Hillary Clinton's camp to spread disinformation that the FBI then took and then paid that Russian national in order to spy on Trump's team. That shit happened. And no one gives a shit. Now all of a sudden Russia collusion and disinformation affecting our democracy. The same people that will today tell you we need a commission to censor disinformation online, blah, 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 have no problem with the FBI totally fucking buying disinformation from a known Russian who they suspected of being a spy in 2008. No problem with the FBI accepting that to spy on Trump's team for a year. No fucking problem at all. And when you bring it up, they're like, whataboutism? When Hillary Clinton's emails, when Republicans were talking about that, they're like, this is bullshit. It's not a big deal, blah, 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 blah. They're classified. It wasn't a big deal. And Now, when it's Trump supposedly having classified, now it's a big deal. And we're like, but wait a minute. And they'll constantly do this. Democrats do it, ignore the story. Republicans do it, it's a big deal. Democrats do it, and you're like, wait a minute, you just said it was a big deal when Republicans do it. Fuck you, that's whataboutism. Ignore the story. Then Republicans do it again, and you're like, but you didn't care when the Democrats said, fuck you, that's whataboutism. Arva's coming in hot. Hashtag believe all women. Okay. How about Juanita Broderick accused Bill Clinton of raping her? Oh, we didn't do that. Instead, we had, well, that shit was going on. James Carville was saying about another woman that accused Bill Clinton of sexual impropriety. This is what you get when you drag $20 through a trailer park. That's what Carville was saying. Hillary Clinton, or Bill Clinton's campaign manager. Not Tara Reid, don't believe her. Kavanaugh accusers, but they'll, believe them. Tara Reid, don't believe her. Next Republican, Ron DeSantis runs for office, and some woman will come out and say, I was sexually assaulted by rape. We'll have to believe them. Have to believe the women that accused Herschel Walker of stuff. Ralph Warnock, the guy he's running against, no, we don't believe them. And then 5 years from now, right, when some Republicans accused and you say, what about Tara Reid accusing Joe Biden? What about Ralph Warnock's wife accusing him? They'll say, yeah, you're right. We should have taken that more seriously. But that's whataboutism. That's what they'll say. Every fucking time. Remember, to this day, Kamala Harris said she believed the multiple women that accused Joe Biden of sexual flirtation, harassment, etc., and yet willfully took a job with him. Would you? If you got a job at a company and you sincerely believed that they were a serial sexual harasser or assaulter, would you work for them? I wouldn't. And yet not one journalist has asked her, why'd you work for a guy you thought was a serial, or do you no longer hashtag believe all those women? Which is it? You were mistaken when you believed those women? Or you still believe them, but you didn't care because you wanted a promotion, so you went to work for Joe Biden? Which one is it? Sorry, Ren. But they don't want to debate me. So they just, these cliches. And then the freaks that do debate me, they have no issues on this. The guy I just debated on the Crucible the other night, whose name I don't even want to say, Justin Friedkin, who I debated. Both of them were supposed to be talking about trustworthiness of the institutions like the FBI. They have nothing to say on the specifics. The guy I debated the other day is just like, well, the Enlightenment's bad, and we should trust the Pope and the Catholics, and we need to have a war on ideas. Get rid of the Second Amendment and the First Amendment. What the fuck does this have to do with our current FBI and whether or not we should trust them? Our current media and whether or not we should trust them? Justin Friedkin, when I talked to him, it was, oh man, well, the FBI's always been corrupt. They've gone after MLK, but we should get rid of capitalism. What does that have to do? Every time we talk specifics on the actual corruption of the FBI involving the investigation into Hillary or Trump, even when it was him bringing up, what about Paul Manafort? Yeah, what about him? Let's talk about it. Well, I don't know enough about that to talk about it. What about George Papadopoulos? Yeah, let's talk about it. Well, I don't know enough to talk about that. Every single time. They don't have anything on the specifics, ever. What about half-baked takes? I talked to him like 2 months ago. Supposedly like a moderate conservative who has a beef with me on this. Right out of the gate, he's like, yeah, I agree with you on all this stuff of corruption in the FBI. Right out of the gate, he just doesn't think we should eliminate the FBI. They all get out of the debate on the specifics of this because they can't defend it. The only one who tries to defend it, which is admirable that he's trying, is Pisco. Because he's a hack. And he's at least intelligent enough to have sort of a legalese defense of, well, prosecutorial discretion, and he could basically parrot what the James Comeys of the world and the Brennans of the world say, and the legal analyst on CNN. And so that's why someone like Destiny won't debate me on this shit. He'll just be the moderator so that he can have his little lackey, Bisco, debate me on it, and then Destiny could basically make it a 2-on-1 and just ask questions of me the whole time. It's okay. I'm totally confident. I'll walk into that 2-on-1. I don't give a shit. And they know they look bad. Destiny knows he looks bad in that debate I did with him on Joe Biden's record. He knows it. Ruminate at least admitted that he got crushed. Sonsel knows he got whacked when we were talking specifics on vaccine mandates. They know it. So instead, they just have to engage in cliches. Oh, Rob's just whataboutism and gish gallops. But they know. They know. They absolutely know. There's our buddy Justin Friedkin. He's back again. How's it going, Justin? You didn't call me a rapist or anything, so I'm not going to ban you. I honestly hope you're doing well, Justin. I hope your comedy career is doing better than your defense of the FBI. But you did not seem like a bad person. You just seemed misled and too partisan. But I wonder if you really think you did well in that debate. Or if you know the truth. I think you know. But hey, fake it till you make it, right? But I do hope you're doing well. I honestly do. But these people aren't qualified to have discussions about these things. They just don't know. And Justin Friedkin, I showed you here the other night, he actually, a few days after our debate, listen, Rob's big claim was that the FBI didn't attempt to verify the dossier before using it to spy on Trump's team. But here's an article that's titled, How They Attempted to Verify. See, that proves it. Then he reads like 2 sentences, and then he skips where it's basically like, the primary subsource said it was bullshit. And they didn't talk to him until November, when the first time they used this information for a warrant was in October. The very article that he cites disproving his very argument. Doesn't matter. You don't know. He just saw a headline. That's it. And then he's like, I'll just come on and say Rob's a moron and we'll gloss over it. Good to go. It's good. Hey, man, it's not a bad tactic. If you got to keep pretending to your audience that you did good, you might as well, right? Just say, yeah, I won. I did good. I did great. Okay. And the sad part is someone like Justin's actually on the cusp of understanding my point if they just listen a little. Because they're like, well, I think the FBI and the establishment's been corrupt against left-wingers in the past. I agree. I think that it's more not a left-right thing. It's more of an establishment and using establishment authority to go to people they perceive as being counterintuitive to the establishment or challenging the establishment. In the past, that was left-wingers. Certainly that was true. There were left-wingers in the past. That's heinous. I talk about it all the time and how terrible that is. I talk about the terrible treatment of Muslim Americans after 9/11 and how disgusting it was. In fact, one of the stories I talk about all the time that I find one of the most infuriating stories that I can imagine, not just by our intel agencies, but by people that piss me off. Remember there was this Islamic bomber I think it was in New York City, and there was video footage of this bomb. It went off, and it didn't kill anyone, but it was a bad blast, right? And so they were looking for this bomber, and they found him, and it turned out that his parents owned a chicken restaurant, I think in New York. I think this was New York. And people started protesting this parents' chicken restaurant because the son's a damn terrorist, Well, it turned out the way the FBI caught this guy was the father who owned the chicken restaurant contacted the FBI. And not only did he contact them after the bombing, he actually contacted the FBI before it even happened and said that he thought his son was being radicalized. I don't know that I could do that. But there was someone who loved this country so much that they were willing to say, I think there's a problem. They probably loved his son too and didn't want to see his son do something crazy or get killed after the crazy event. So he called the police. He called the FBI. And yet still he was treated like shit for doing everything right. That story pissed me off so much, and I've talked about it quite frequently. Now, do I think there's a problem with Islamic fundamentalism? Of course. But I also think there's a problem with white nationalism. I talked about that. I've debated Richard Spencer. But this idea that I only care about FBI corruption when it affected Trump, bullshit. Not even close. Talked about how they had smeared Jill Stein with this, how they smeared Tulsi Gabbard with it, and they attempted to smear Bernie Sanders with Russiagate shit. I don't have any love for most of those people. The problem is the corrupt institution that's bigger than any one politician. And Justin understands they've been corrupt, but only when they go after people he likes. And Orange Man bad, so we could forgive it. That's one of the problems. One of the big problems is that so many people on the left that otherwise would have been skeptical of a lot of these institutions, like so many of the anti-war left, are now the biggest allies of these institutions. Why? Because Obama was a cool dude and Trump was the devil. Orange Man bad. Orange Man said something, must be bad. If that means cheering for the CIA and FBI to take him down, I'm all for it. So the same people that would have spent years saying, can you believe what the FBI did to MLK? Can you believe what they did to, Abby Hoffman? Now all of a sudden they're like, I trust the FBI. They're great. And then, of course, Justin Friedkin will just fall back on it's all capitalism's fault. It's just bullshit. How do I feel about Tulsi Gabbard? I like Tulsi, but she's still a leftist, My big issue is corruption. And I think Tulsi's I'll give her an 8 out of 10 on corruption. I think she's right to call out the warmongering Democratic Party. I think she's right to call out the censorious left. She's right to call out woke people that want to, all that shit's true. And because I'm concerned about corruption most, that's all speaking to me, right? But do I have any misapprehensions that she would favor the economic policies I like? No. Or, all sorts of litany of problems. No, she's a lefty. But my big issue is corruption, and I think we should work with left-wingers that also want to fight that. And I think it's very brave of her to come out and do this. However, I will never forget this, ever. And you could ask my buddy Carlos, because when this happened, I was off the chain pissed. Tulsi supported the Russia investigation into Trump. I think she supported the first impeachment. I don't think she voted to impeach, but she supported the impeachment, the trial. Fuck that. And I said it at the time. I was like, she of everyone should know how corrupt this shit is. And yet she's going along with it. I'll always remember that. When it mattered, when the chips were down, that's what she did. Now, could she have turned a new leaf? Sure, it's possible. Do I think she'll join the Republican Party? I don't think she should. She might. But I think she'll have more legitimacy as an independent or third party. So I don't think she will. It would be my guess. It'd be like, I guess Jesse Ventura could have joined the Republicans, but it doesn't really fit the shtick. She's definitely pulling people away. But that's what you could say about people like that I respect, like Jimmy Dore and Aaron Maté. That's why, even though they're kind of kooky and stuff, Jackson, Hinkle, and Hawes, like, you're communist. But on the big issue of the corruption of our system, I agree with them. Now, I think they may think Russia are good guys. I don't think that. I think that both Ukraine sucks and Russia sucks. I just want the war to end peacefully. That's what I want. But I understand the need for allies that agree on the big issues of me, and they agree on the corruption. So, hopefully I'll be talking to them soon. I've reached out to Jackson several times, but unfortunately unable to get in touch with him. So hopefully in the near future I'll be talking to them. But they have a huge platform, and there are left-wing people that they speak to. Keely's, that's funny. But that's basically the show for tonight. I'm going to wrap up here. I like to be done by midnight. So, we talked about economics a little with Econoboy and Pisco. And the gaslighting of, it's Russia's fault. I wasn't wrong on the economy. They were. I talked about this a little, and then, we talked about Vaush, the victim. I'll close with this. Last night I talked a little. It is, no problem, Bill. Thanks for being here, man. Hopefully we'll hang out soon. I talked about this last night. Again, let me repeat. I'm a very happy person. I really am. I'm a little intense. I get that. I think the issues I'm talking about are important. But make no mistake, I'm not self-sacrificing much or anything. Sometimes I put more money into the channel than I make. Other times not. I made a decent amount tonight. Thank you to everyone that donated. Anonymous, Bill, Gizmo donated. If I missed anyone, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Honestly, I do. But I do this because I enjoy it. It's a hobby. If I don't enjoy it, then I'll stop doing it, right? I have a full-time job. I have other priorities. But I do believe everything I say. I am authentically this person, and the people that know me in real life would say that. But I'm a fun-loving person. But I will say this. I cannot believe, when you look at the scale of what's been done in this country in the past 2 years, I'm not one that likes to talk too emotionally many times. But Jesse Kelly, someone I follow on Twitter, I think they're from OAN. He's from OAN. He has a radio show. And he has at least 2 episodes that I've heard that are hour-long episodes that are just people calling in and talking about how devastated they've been in these past 2 years, particularly with COVID lockdowns. And when you hear these stories, and then you hear about more forcing, they're gonna now the CDC is voting to vaccinate the children. Just more bullshit. These same people that bullshitted us and made lives hell in this country for people not only have faced no consequences, but still continue. Some of these stories, I don't even know what to say. It infuriates me so. I don't know how people. I can't believe we haven't seen more people losing their fucking minds. There was a woman that called in and talked about how our daughter's special needs and needs to see people's face to be able to talk and understand stuff. And how they fucking force these kids to wear masks. And so she doesn't have any relationships anymore. There were people calling in saying how their parents died alone in nursing homes. They couldn't even have a funeral for them. Scared with dementia. Didn't know where they were. Thousands and thousands of these stories while fucking people got rich and powerful and laughed in your fucking face and went and ate at the restaurants that they wanted and all of this shit. And we're supposed to just be like, oh, well, move on. What's left-wing Twitch saying today? What's the new Keffels drama? Oh, H3 got banned. Let's talk about that. Fuck those people. Seriously. It's absolutely enraging. Bad shit happens all the time. It's always sad. But to have people in positions of power peddle this bullshit, advocate for the censorship, claim the moral high ground. If you don't agree with us, you want grandma to die. All the while laughing their fucking ass off as your grandma died and you couldn't have a funeral for them because they forced nursing homes to accept COVID patients and then you lost your house because they told you were non-essential. It's too much. And I gotta, watch. Well, did Ted Cruz go to Cancun again this week? Did he? Did he go to Cancun? Yeah. What about Ye? Oh, he's an anti-Semite, says the left. Let's have another show about it. I'm not wishing anything evil on anyone, anything. But these are crimes. And they're not going to stop. They're going to keep using children as guinea pigs. I said it last night. If we are to judge a society, we should judge it by how they treat the most vulnerable, which would be children. We locked down children so that teachers' unions could get raises. That's what we did. We intentionally harmed children, knowing full well that all the science said it was a terrible thing to do. We knew it. And that's what we did. So that Randy Weirgarten could get some more money and get some more democratic agendas pushed. That's what we did. That's the legacy that we'll leave when we're long gone and people look back at this time in history. And I might have fought against it and you might have fought against it, but we fucking lost. That's what happened. And we're part of it. And sadly, no one will probably face consequences. But I'll try my damnedest to get those consequences. So, anyways, that's the show for tonight. Tomorrow night, hopefully I'll be streaming around 9 p.m. I don't have anything specific lined up, so I'm sure some crazy news story will happen we'll be talking about. But yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks again to everyone who reached out to Sitch and Adam. I haven't heard back from them exactly when I'll be on the show, but I really appreciate that my audience helped out with that. So hopefully that's a new audience that I'll be able to connect to. If you want to help the show out, in addition to the generous people that donate, one of the things you could do is, if there's a bigger streamer that you would like to see me interact with, whether it be someone I agree with, someone that I would disagree with and have a debate with, reach out to them on their channels. Like if you give them a super chat, or if you just reach out to them, someone like Tim Pool, I would love to get on Tim Pool's show. I'm only like 3 hours away from his house. He lives in West Virginia. I would happily go there. So if you all could reach out, that would be a good one. We'll just start with there. If you get bored and you have a Twitter feed, start adding Tim Pool that you would like to see me on the show. I mean, he had Victim Vaush on there, right? Good Victim Vaush. I think that I would be better than them. Yeah, that would be something that would be really helpful to me. I will see who I could raid here, and then I'm going to head downstairs and go to bed. Mr. Hank without his cast tonight. I hope he's sleeping. I'm worried he won't sleep good, because for those who didn't know, my son was in a cast because he broke his leg and he just got it off today. So it's still aching him and his leg's still itchy. At first, when he first got the cast put on, he was having a lot of trouble going to sleep. I wonder if he'll have trouble tonight, because just when you're sleeping, it'll feel different and weird. We'll see. Lecture fan or Stardust? Your call. Stardust says she's watching the trial of the Wisconsin Christmas Parade Massacre. Lecture fan is playing Counter-Strike. Let's do Lecture fan. All right, thank you guys so much. I should be on tomorrow. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you so much for me reaching 2,000 subscribers. So I'll come down with a new goal. We have achieved, I was going to do it anyways, but we are going to do the Saturday before the election, as long as everything goes swimmingly, a 24-hour stream. I'll try to get some guests lined up for that, so it should be a good time. So thank you all so much. Enjoy this raid of Lecture Fan, and as always, have a good one.
Robnoerr rating with a party of 31. Boom. Thank you, Rob.